Running from the man, yeah, the madman's coming, yeah, the man's gunning for me tonight. I spent the last week running from the heat, but the beat's coming alive. Let's get lost tonight. Lord, who's on my right?
All right. What the heck? I was like, am I hallucinating? All right. Sorry. I didn't know this has volume on it, but we're learning new things about these screens at this setup. Welcome. Welcome, guys. Welcome to Without a Country. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Corinne Fisher. I am a stand-up comedian, a podcaster, and a former New York City mayoral candidate 2025. Now doing a lot of work with Dream, with Disrupt, with a bunch of political organizations around New York City that also have a national reach. This is Sir Alfred Hitchcock. He's my little baby boy. He's my best friend. I know you guys tune in to see him. Right? Oh my gosh. He has his dog Ritos with him today from his Auntie Paula. And he is ready to take in some news. He wants to remind you to adopt, don't shop. If you guys are interested in adopting a pet, he is from Pup Stars Rescue, but there's a million great rescues all over the country, all over the world that are getting fine little rescue dogs like him every day. He's a rescue from Tennessee originally. Reminder to spay and neuter. And then you can help decrease the population of unhoused dogs, cats, everything in between. All right. Welcome to the show. I'm already amped up. If you follow me on Instagram, my handle is Philanthropy Gal. And then Without a Country Podcast is at Without a Country Podcast. But I'm already amped up because, I knew a couple weeks ago that Aubrey Plaza was pregnant and that Chris Abbott was the father. And I was on the edge of my seat to see how the internet would respond. I mean, not even on the edge of my seat, because I just knew it was going to be bad. I knew it was going to be exactly what it was. And I made a video about it. I spent a good portion of the afternoon researching this, very gendered experience of losing a spouse or a boyfriend publicly. And while I know, people are often very weird about grief and often think that whenever you move on, it's too soon. It is a specifically seemingly more difficult experience for women. Obviously, that was the lens that I was seeing it through. And then I did a little research and I found that there are some studies and data that show that it is a bit more of a gendered experience, especially when it comes to suicide in particular. And in addition, often it is a male thing to weaponize suicide or the threat of suicide to either make your ex feel guilty or to try and convince her to stay around. Again, these are things we knew, things that we have explored both on this show and on GWF. And so I was not surprised, but I think that, you have to offer this information to people again and again before they can fully digest it. Obviously, I am both a woman and someone who has experienced grief. I have had, he wasn't my boyfriend yet because we had just began dating, but I have had someone I was in a romantic at the very beginning, a romantic relationship with, who died. It wasn't by suicide. And that came with its own like issues to navigate, because the issue there was not that I moved on too fast. Probably the issue might have been that I moved on too slow. And the issue was more so like you didn't know this person long enough to feel the amount of grief that you are feeling. But that's a whole other thing for another day. Again, it's just a grief, obviously something I think about a lot and I have observed a lot. We talked about it, most recently actually with the assassination of Charlie Kirk on this show. And although at this point, I do think that unfortunately Erica Kirk is weaponizing her grief, or not even experiencing grief, or or just possibly was.
Corinne, I'm not hearing you. Crystal, are you hearing Corinne?
No, I am not.
All right, yeah, Corinne, we need you to figure out your audio and we'll retake that.
Let me double check you.
Boop, boop, boop. All right. Am I back? I adjusted something slightly on my H6, and of course the whole thing went to shit. You guys hear me again? Could someone give me a...
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Anyway, so we most recently experienced it with Erica Kirk. And again, it was, that was something that I wanted to track. And that's why immediately after the assassination, when all the Democrats felt that it was appropriate to go on long form rants about how Erica Kirk didn't seem like someone who was grieving, I held back for a period of time. It's still not a topic that I feel comfortable talking about, because until we have it proven that Erica Kirk was somehow in on her husband's death, because Erica Kirk is living a different life than you and me, right? So yes, she is a mother, and a mother of children that she shared with Charlie Kirk, and yes, she is a widow, but she's also someone who was on a mission, on a mission with her husband. And even though it is a mission that I do not agree with, and even though it is a mission that I in fact look down upon and think is disgusting, that does not take away from the fact that she is on a mission. So for me, if I was on a political, social, religious mission with my husband, and my husband is assassinated, yes, I am feeling grief, but depending on, what, I'm probably also going to feel a deep motivation to continue that mission in his honor. And we all have different levels of strength from when we can, come back from that. But I don't think it's crazy to be motivated, in those early days of grief, especially. And I feel like she's still in the early part of grief. In the very early part of grief, you might not be in the deepest depths of your grief yet. My grief, my biggest grief was my father, obviously. And it was, different because it was a grief that I had more time to prepare for. Obviously, an assassination you don't have time to prepare for, or maybe you do if you're Erica Kirk. Again, conspiracy theory. But I would also argue that a lot of times in the beginning of, parts of grief, you are in shock. And in the shock part of grief, where you're maybe still in denial that it is even a permanent loss, you very well might have the motivation and energy to continue someone's mission, especially, if your spouse is assassinated, there's an anger there. We know few things are as motivating as revenge. And even though you might be feeling deep sorrow, you might also be feeling like, well, now this mission that my husband and I are on is even more important because he literally lost his life for it. And a lot of times what we do in grief is to try and make sure that the loss of the person was not in vain. And the best way for someone to do that, especially with a person like Charlie Kirk, who had been working on Turning Point since 2012, is to continue his work. Again, this is not, Erica Kirk didn't invent taking on someone else's work. We see spouses do it often. We see children do it. Martin Luther King, Jr.'s daughter, she, and the wife, it was like the daughter, right? And the daughter and wife, I believe. Definitely the wife. Obviously, that's Coretta Scott King. But definitely Martin Luther King. I believe I follow his daughter on Instagram. Yeah. So he has two daughters, Bernice and Yolanda. Yolanda has passed away though. Yeah. So Bernice is the one I follow, and Bernice is also following on, the torch of her father. And again, I don't know the timeline. I didn't go back. Obviously, we don't have the internet for when Martin Luther King was assassinated to track it in the same way that we do now. But again, this is just like this is not obscure. Anyway, so this all brings me to Aubrey Plaza. And I've been thinking about Aubrey Plaza all day. I was so angered about what people were saying online about her. Obviously, everyone hates to see a grieving woman move on. A lot of angry people who aren't getting dicked down on the internet certainly don't think that someone should have been able to have a husband and then, get dicked down, relatively soon after. As I go over in the video that I posted on my Instagram, Aubrey Plaza and her late ex-husband, Jeff Baina, had been separated since 2024. And they were living on different coasts. Jeff Baina had, talked about mental illness and its influence on his art throughout his career. So from that, I am going to guess that it is something that, he had an experience with, both through family ties. I know his stepmother had some, form of a mental illness that she had been fighting and that he expressed artistic viewpoints on in his work. And obviously, when someone commits suicide, I think it's fair to assume that they are also going through some mental health issues. And, so they had already been separated for that length of time. We don't know why the separation happened. It very well could have tied into, her having been a caretaker for the later part of their relationship. We don't know. We weren't there. They were pretty private about that relationship. Aubrey Plaza was then quiet about it for the first 8 months after Jeff Baina's suicide. She spoke about it briefly with Amy Poehler on Amy Poehler's podcast. And, now she has found joy and found love with Christopher Abbott, and she is pregnant, expecting her first child, and everyone has a problem with that, or many people have a problem with that. And additionally, Aubrey Plaza is 41. So I got to be honest, if, maybe her and Jeff Baina as a couple didn't want kids, we don't know why. Maybe Jeff Baina didn't want kids. She did, but she loved Jeff Baina more than she loved the idea of having kids. And then she meets this other person and their relationship is different, A lot of people with mental health issues don't want to procreate because mental health problems are often genetic. And maybe Jeff Baina didn't want to have, for the same reason as Sarah Silverman has expressed not wanting to have children. Maybe he was afraid that his mental health would genetically pass on to, we don't know. Again, I'm just going through every fucking scenario here. And then when she met Christopher Abbott, she was like, I feel something different with him. Again, maybe her loss of Jeff Baina meant that she wanted to create new life. I do find that, in theory to be very healing. And, she's also 41. So if she wants to have kids, TikTok, and you got to answer when opportunity knocks. So I'm just so sick over this whole thing. I'm so agitated. There is something about the dawn of spring that I find historically turns me into even more of a feminist than I already am. I don't know if it's like because you see the male gaze more prominently when women are more scantily clad. Like, I don't know what it is. Or maybe I'm fucking bipolar, undiagnosed, and I'm experiencing that mania that bipolar people experience in the spring. I'm not bipolar. I wish it is. Okay. Anyway, I don't wish I'm bipolar. I was like, I more so wish that there was something to explain the 50,000 thoughts in my head at all times. But I think it's just being an aware person in the world. My dog is now in the kitchen demanding more food, even though he just ate. Anyway, so the enemy of the state this week is anyone talking shit about Aubrey Plaza. Just because I knew it would be so, I also checked out some headlines to piss myself off about Aubrey Plaza's pregnancy, and because the press and the media stays being absolutely misogynistic, of course we knew what the headlines would be. There's headlines like the Press Democrat did Aubrey Plaza pregnant 1 year after husband's death. The San Francisco Chronicle did Aubrey Plaza pregnant with first child, a year after husband's death. Let's see. The more mainstream news sources, I think, have learned a little bit better. Of course, Page Six, they have to be dirtbags. So they did Aubrey Plaza pregnant with her first baby 1 year after husband's death report. And it just really makes me sick. Even the Daily Beast did Aubrey Plaza expecting first baby a year after husband's death, which is just like, I think, so inappropriate. And the authors of a lot of these articles are women. Like one of the ones I previously read was a woman. The Isabel Van Bruggen is the author of this Daily Beast article, and like the subheadline, it's organized into a place called New Chapter. They kind of do like these like umbrellas on Daily Beast, and it is called New Chapter, so that is positive. But and I don't know. Sometimes the writer is not in charge of the headline. I think sometimes, if I'm correct, I'm pretty sure sometimes the editor chooses the headline and it's not the journalist. So I don't necessarily want to blame Isabel Van Bruggen. She is a freelance writer for the Daily Beast, and but these headlines are, I know they're doing them so that people click on them, but it's really fucked up. And if you're writing a headline like that, you're contributing to make the world a less good place. And I really fucking hate you. And all this backlash about the death of, Jeff Baina and Aubrey Plaza now being pregnant with Chris Abbott's child, or with her child that Chris Abbott, loaned some cum to. It got me thinking about the 2015 Michelle Carter case, which I didn't include this in my video because I thought it was straying from the topic. And when you're consuming short form media, you only have, so much bandwidth. But since this is long form content, I thought this would be the perfect place to discuss it. We might have discussed it at one point on this show. I can't remember. I have gone over this story before, but Michelle Carter is the only case legally that I could find proof of where the woman was actually charged in a court of law with having contributed to her boyfriend's suicide, even though she was not physically there. She contributed via text message, right? And so that's the story with Michelle Carter. She was charged with involuntary manslaughter for having sent her boyfriend at the time, obviously now ex-boyfriend because he's deceased, but her boyfriend Conrad, she had sent him thousands of abusive text messages, including ones that were encouraging him to kill himself. And he killed himself by, sitting in his closed garage in his car and turning on the car. So that's how. And apparently she was like texting him while he was in there, and he did ultimately pass away. So I looked up, to see what she's up to now. And of course, People magazine, they did a little story in July of last year, July 2025, that said, "Where is Michelle Carter now? Inside her life, 11 years after encouraging her boyfriend to kill himself." And again, even though it is, it was decided by a jury, which I wouldn't even necessarily trust, because, I often think about what it would be like to be tried in front of a jury of my peers. And I have already made, peace with the fact that I'd 100% be going to jail, or possibly being sent to the chair. If it was a jury of my peers deciding my fate, because a jury of our peers are often deciding our fate online, and we see how unsympathetic we are. So makes me quite uncomfortable to know that if shit hits the fan, a jury of my peers is going to be making the decision for me. Anyway, where is Michelle Carter now? Again, inside her life, 11 years after encouraging her boyfriend to kill himself. This is by Lindsay Idle. After serving 11 months in prison for involuntary manslaughter, Michelle Carter was released from jail in January 2020. Michelle Carter went from a grieving girlfriend to a convicted criminal in the 2014 death of her alleged boyfriend, Conrad Roy III, and the only evidence was thousands of text messages. Roy's death initially looked like a tragic teen suicide. The Massachusetts teen died on July 12th, 2014 from carbon monoxide poisoning. However, the 18-year-old's untimely death was quickly evolved into a complex and controversial case. During the investigation, detectives uncovered more than 1,000 chilling text messages between Carter, who was 17 at the time, and Roy. From 2012 to 2014, she attempted to discourage his death by suicide, but eventually urged him to complete the act of violence and declined to notify anyone when he did, per the New York Times. It was one of those things where you keep reading and it just keeps getting worse. And that's what kind of put everything into motion, Fairhaven Police Detective Scott Gordon said in an episode of Dateline Reckless. And I mean, I would need to look a little bit more into this case, but I think it's a very interesting piece of information that from 2012 to 2014, the records show she was discouraging his death by suicide, but then kind of urged him to do it. And this, as a woman who has been in many relationships with men, many of whom were depressed, gives me a little bit more information. To me, it's now me asking the question, like, this now seems like an instance, and I think most heterosexual women have been in a relationship like this, where she became, her boyfriend's therapist. And yes, an adult woman would know to get out of this relationship, but I don't think a 17-year-old girl has the tools to know where her role stops and where her role starts. So, when you're young and you're in love, and someone is threatening harm upon themselves, obviously, your first thought is, oh my God, I have to stop them from doing this. And now there is a level of responsibility or burden on me to make sure this person doesn't do it. And then as time goes on, two things can happen. Well, I guess multiple things can happen, but two things in this instance I think can happen. Number one is you just get fucking sick and tired of hearing someone talking about wanting to kill themselves. And although I know this sounds like this is a lot to take on, I think this is the natural thought process of the human brain. And I know that we all like to clutch our pearls and gasp when the natural, sometimes unpleasant thought process of the human brain is uttered aloud, but this is what happens. And so I think, the first possible thing that happened was this girl was just like, oh my God, like this guy won't stop talking about killing himself. Maybe I should just fucking let him put himself out of his misery. Again, I know there is some empathy lacking in that moment, but at a certain point, we're all getting pushed to the edge, right? And then I think the second thing that could have happened is possibly very empathetic. I'm guessing not from, by the nature of the text messages, but I think in another thing that could have happened in a similar scenario is that they work together as a teen couple. I don't know how much they can do, but if they're working on this alone, they try to look through and see, what the choices are. And if after 2 years, someone's brain isn't getting better, it begins to look, that like it lacks hope. And so maybe they begin to think, or she begins to think, the kindest thing that she can do for this person is to let them take their own life and to let them be out of their misery and pain. And this is certainly not an uncommon thought. Suicide is extremely prevalent in our society. And that's why it's even more crazy that you have to asterisk it out or bleep it out when you're talking about it online, because I think that, we need to be talking about it more. Obviously, it's an issue that's plaguing our society. But you will see a lot of comments when someone takes their own life these days. That's like, I hope they're at peace now. And I think for all of us who have had trouble navigating the human experience, which is pretty much everyone living, some people turn to the people in their life. Some people turn to religion. Some people turn to drugs. Some people turn to drinking. Some people start volunteering. Some people start stand-up comedy. Whatever it is, I think we can all agree that, the human experience is one that is difficult to get through the whole thing fucking living. And And so I think now in this modern society, I think we are starting to accept that maybe if you don't have access, or you can't take, or you don't agree with taking, or you don't want to take, or you've tried taking medication and it doesn't work, and you've tried all the things that people talk about doing to heal or ebb depression, that maybe I should just, kill myself and start again. I don't know, and I'm not suggesting that if you haven't found something to quell your depression or your hopelessness yet, that this is the answer. In fact, many religions would argue that you are, punished in the afterlife if you kill yourself. Or if you want to go with New Age spirituality, it is said that you will have to live the same life again until you complete the tasks that the universe needs you to complete. Like, whatever you believe, there's certainly a lot of suicide rhetoric, propaganda, insert whatever word you want to insert here, that is trying to stop us from killing ourselves. But I think the best thing you can do to try and stop people from killing themselves is to be a good friend, be a good neighbor, to try and understand people who have different viewpoints than you, which if you're tuning into this show right now, everyone here is trying to do, to try and vote in, for politicians who will make our lives better, not worse, who will, who go out and volunteer, who help to get and offer resources to people in our lives who have less than we do. These are the kinds of things that, if you are really anti-suicide, if you are really pro-life, that you would be doing. And so, all right, back to the article. Again, I'm fucking hot about this. It was one of those things where you keep reading and it just keeps getting worse. And that's what kind of put everything in motion, Fairhaven Police Detective Scott Gordon said in an episode of Dateline Reckless. As a result, Carter was charged with involuntary manslaughter in February 2015. She was ultimately found guilty a little over 2 years later and was sentenced to 15 months in prison. She was released after 11 months in January 2020. And has maintained a low profile since returning to her home in Massachusetts. But while Carter, who is now 28, may be avoiding the spotlight, her story has gained widespread media attention over the years. So where is Michelle Carter now? Here's a look at her life over a decade after Conrad Roy III died by suicide. So born August 11th, 1996, Carter is the daughter of David and Gail Carter, a sales manager and a home stager, respectively, according to Esquire. She grew up in Plainville, Massachusetts, a suburban town between Providence, Rhode Island, and Boston. As a teen, not really the hotbed of empathy. As a teen, Carter struggled with mental illness. In 2014, she was switched from antidepressant Prozac to Celexa. Okay, right. So right there, we have the information that she has also understands what it's like to be mentally ill. And, sometimes it's good to have that understanding in a couple. And sometimes if you guys are both suffering from the same thing, it can egg each other on, right? Like, I had a boyfriend in the past who also had OCD. And in the beginning, I was like, oh, this is cool. He'll really understand my OCD. But by the end of it, it actually devolved into, holy shit, being around someone with OCD, and in this case, someone with much worse OCD than I have, it really triggered my OCD. And it also brought up a lot of anger in me because, in my opinion, this person did not put a lot of work into getting over their OCD. And I think while I don't know if you can fully, I'd have to look at, to see if it's, if experts argue that you can fully cure yourself from OCD. I don't know about that, but you can certainly do work where your ruminations and so your obsessions and your compulsions will certainly be far less. And I had been doing that work on myself and with myself since I was 12, and with professionals as well, since I was 12 years old. So to see a fucking adult man who seemingly just let himself be a slave to his own obsessions and compulsions, quite frankly, pissed me off. And I think it said a lot about, the way in which he shows up in the world, So again, I digress. And in June of that year, she was admitted to McLean Hospital, a psychiatric facility in Belmont, Massachusetts, for treatment for anorexia. Socially, Carter struggled to find a group to belong to, according to friends of hers at King Philip Regional High School in Wrentham, Massachusetts. People walked all over her. Carter's friend, Evan Andrews, told Esquire Michelle wanted the confidence she saw others having. were Michelle Carter and Conrad Roy III dating. Despite living an hour apart in Massachusetts, Roy in Fairhaven and Carter in Plainville, the teens first met in February 2012 in Naples, Florida. According to Esquire, Carter was visiting her grandparents and Roy was visiting her great aunt a few doors down, or his great aunt, sorry, a few doors down. They spent time together on vacation and continued the relationship when they returned home to Massachusetts. Over the next 2 years, Roy and Carter saw each other in person no more than 5 times, according to his mom, but the two kept in touch with hours of phone calls, emails, and text messages. And we know from 90 Day Fiancé, you can certainly, fall very deeply in love or have the impression that you are very deeply in love, depending on who you're asking, via, exchanges on the phone. In their conversations, Roy opened up to Carter about his previous suicide attempts. He had tried to die by suicide at least 4 times before he died in 2014, per the New York Times. So this is not something that started with his relationship with Carter. This is something that he had been struggling with for a very long time. The two bonded over taking antidepressants and shared mental health struggles. Roy also struggled with social anxiety and depression. By the summer of 2014, Carter reportedly asked Roy about their relationship status, texting things like, "Are we basically dating? And I want to be able to say I was your girlfriend." Roy responded by telling Carter, "Yes, you are." However, Roy's parents were unaware that he was in a relationship with anyone at the time of his death, which I don't think is crazy for young people. I've certainly been in full-on relationships where my parents didn't know. I love to keep a relationship secret. It's one of the greatest joys in life, and I highly recommend you guys do it too. I know everyone loves introducing everyone to the family, but there is so fucking joyful. There is a lot of joy in having something just to yourself. Blaze 14 ZX said Hulu made a dramatic retelling of Michelle's story called The Girl from Plainfield. The show is aligned with my first theory. Love. Let's see. On July 12th, 2014, I'll have to watch that. On July 12th, 2014, Roy died by suicide in a Kmart parking lot. Sorry, I had said garage previously. That was just me filling in information because I assumed that you would have to be in a garage, but I guess if you put something in your tailpipe, you can also die that way in a parking lot. Authorities found his body the following day. What was Michelle Carter charged with? Carter was charged with involuntary manslaughter in February 2015 for allegedly convincing Roy to die by suicide via text message. She denied the allegations and pleaded not guilty. Police leveled the manslaughter charges against Carter after uncovering more than 1,000 text messages between her and Roy. In the text, she reportedly strongly influenced his decision to take his own life, encouraged him to commit suicide, and guided him in his engagement of activities which led to his death, according to us from the Bristol District Attorney's Office. I mean, and from this, I would look like, it's like, okay, well, I met someone who was already struggling with mental health issues, has already tried to kill himself multiple times. And, I'm not giving him this idea, but I am, when you have an idea independently and then you fall for someone who encourages you to act on that idea, yeah, that is a powerful thing, but you already did have the idea. You're independently of that person. Again, I understand that she was charged with involuntary manslaughter. I think this is a very interesting case. I can read into it more. I've read into it a little bit again over the years. I would. This is something I could probably do a whole paper on. But I am still, I still don't know how I feel about being able to convince someone to kill themselves, or that another person can really be held accountable for you taking your own life. I find that I think that's very difficult. Again, but I mean, this is an interesting case. Carter suggested several methods for Roy to die by, and again, because they're both young, I think an adult might be like, all right, I'm going to block this person who's telling me to kill themselves. But if you already feel so low, you already think the world would be better without you, someone you love and hold in a high regard is now telling you, yeah, this is probably the way, that can be super convincing. I think it's a little bit hard for me, and this is my bias, to put myself in those shoes, just because I can't think of a time when someone else's opinion had this great of an effect on my life. Like, I'm trying to think, like, if Posh Spice called me to tell me to kill myself, I definitely still wouldn't do it, but it wouldn't make me feel great, you know? Carter suggested several methods for Roy to die by suicide. And in the hours prior to his death, she urged him to follow through with his suicide plan, writing, "You're ready and prepared. All you have to do is turn the generator on and you will be free and happy. No more pushing it off. No more waiting," which again, you know, speaks to me saying it's like she, you know, maybe she's like, this guy just needs to be out of his pain at this point. More like a suicide pod, or like someone who would invent a suicide pod or be okay with that. And also really freaky to read in this day and age when we have AI convincing people to kill themselves, because that does seem, you know, aligned with the type of things we've heard AI telling people. More damning texts include messages that Carter sent to Roy's mother, Lynn, and a friend, Samantha Boardman, in the days following his death. She wrote to Boardman on July 21st, 2014, that if police or relatives read her text messages with Roy, she would be, quote, done. "His family will hate me and I could go to jail," Carter continued in her message to Boardman. Carter also texted Lynn on July 25th, 2014, writing, "It's my fault and it's something I'll never forgive myself for." The criminal charge and subsequent court case set legal precedent as the prosecution was attempting to prove that blame for Roy's death could be verbal, not physical. Carter's defense, however, argued unsuccessfully that her only role in this is words, and even moved for dismissal on the grounds that the texts were free speech and therefore protected by the First Amendment. But I would argue there, and we've talked about the, you know, the first free speech and stuff more, when you are trying to incite violence, then you are outside the constraints for free speech. And I would argue, if I was, you know, a lawyer, that free speech, that suicide is violence upon oneself, you know, right? So I would, you know, I think it is the free speech. I don't think that is a good argument, because she was trying to incite violence, even though it was, you know, inciting violence that Conrad would inflict upon himself. It's still inciting violence, and therefore not covered by free speech or the amendment. You know, Carter faced a criminal trial for the involuntary manslaughter charge in June 2017. Though thousands of text messages were presented during the 10-day trial, the precedent-setting case came down to an exchange that Carter had with her friend Boardman after Roy's death by suicide. According to the text messages, Roy allegedly tried to abort his suicide attempt by exiting the truck at one point, telling Carter, who was supposedly on the phone with him at the time, that he was scared and didn't want to abandon his family. Carter reportedly responded by telling him to get back in and see through his initial plan. And I mean, again, not to get like fucked up here, but I think we're already probably past that. And I do love to get fucked up. It's like, I mean, how many times have we been with someone they love and they're trying to abandon the plan that they had? Again, I'm not saying I'm pro this. I'm just trying to see this from every angle. You know, it's like, she's like, we've already been through this for years with you, not sure if you want to kill yourself or not, trying to kill yourself multiple times. And like, she probably, in that sense, like, thought she knew the person she loved more than he knew himself, and was like, you're having second thoughts now, but this is ultimately what you want in your heart. His death was my fault. He got out of the car and I told him to get back in because I knew he would do it all over again the next day, Carter wrote to Boardman. While the hundreds of text messages from Carter encouraging Roy's suicidal planning were deliberate and reckless, according to Judge Lawrence Moniz, they did not cause his death. However, it was her instructions to Roy to get back in his pickup truck, which had become a toxic environment inconsistent with human life, and her failure to notify anyone else of Roy's suicide that ultimately led to Judge Moniz's guilty verdict of involuntary manslaughter. Which is interesting because something else I read said that it was a jury of her peers that decided that. But because it's a criminal trial, so it's by jury, right? A judge is deciding when it's not a criminal case. All right. Well, anyway, I love when pieces of news have conflicting events that are pretty important. Anyway, she instructed Mr. Roy to to get back in the truck, well knowing of all of the feelings that he had exchanged with her, his ambiguities, his fears, his concerns. Moniz said as he read his decision to the court. And after Roy re-entered his vehicle, she did nothing. She did not call the police or Mr. Roy's family. Moniz continued. Finally, she did not issue a simple additional instruction to Roy, get out of the truck. And like, even in this, it's like, they're putting a lot of onus on Michelle Carter in this still. You know, again, I'd have to read more about this trial, but I still, and even when this story came out, I was like, this is interesting. This is an interesting legal precedent to set. I don't know if I agree with it, though. She instructs, and after, okay, let's see. How long did Michelle Carter spend in prison? Though Carter faced up to 20 years in prison, she was sentenced to 15 months in jail. She was allowed to remain free while her attorney appealed her case. But after the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court upheld her conviction in February 2019, Carter was ordered to begin her prison sentence. And I mean, you know, okay, you know, she served a prison sentence. It doesn't really matter how long she's in physical prison, because you rest assured she's going to be in an emotional prison for the rest of her life. Not only her own emotions, but the actions of people in her world. Don't worry, she's never going to forget that Conrad Roy killed himself. That's for sure. In July 2019, Carter's legal team appealed her conviction and sentence to the U.S. Supreme Court. That September, after 7 months behind bars, Carter asked the parole board for an early release. Both requests were ultimately denied. She was denied parole, with the board stating that she lacked sincerity. I mean, okay, that's every woman to ever exist. And the Supreme Court declined to hear Carter's appeal. However, Carter did not serve her full 15-month sentence. She was released from prison on January 23rd, 2020, 3 months early, for what is called good time credit, a program where inmates can take up to 10 days off their sentence per month for exemplary behavior. That's very common. Attending programs and classes and working inside the jail, as Sheriff's Office spokesman Jonathan Darling told People. Details about Carter's whereabouts and life post-prison are scarce. Since her release from the Bristol County House of Corrections in January 2020, Carter has only been spotted once outside of her Plainville home, doing yard work in April 2022, according to photos obtained by the New York Post. Carter's probation ended on August 1st, 2020, as the Massachusetts Probation Service confirmed to Mass Live. When her probation ended, so did its terms, which included a condition prohibiting Carter from profiting from her story or the case. Interesting. Silenced, I would say. Despite the conditions being lifted, Carter has yet to speak out publicly regarding Roy's death and her subsequent conviction. Well, Michelle, you're welcome on this show. I'd really like to hear the story straight from the horse's mouth. What are the implications of Michelle Carter's conviction? Though Carter's conviction is now in the past, the legal ramifications of her case have the ability to affect what constitutes a criminal act going forward. Martin Healy, chief legal counsel to the Massachusetts Bar Association, said in a statement that Carter's conviction will have national implications. Healy added that seemingly remote and distant communications could rise to the level of criminal culpability. I mean, so does this mean that I can take legal action against the hundreds of people who have told me to kill myself online, via Instagram, via email, via the portal on my mayoral website? Kill yourself was a big one that I got on there. So, you know, as a result of Carter's case, Matthew Siegel, the legal director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts, also warned that Carter's guilty verdict could threaten free speech statewide. And it's interesting that the ACLU is taking that stance, right? Because again, I think there's a real argument there that it is inciting violence, but suicide and violence against oneself is always treated differently. But one person looking to use Carter's case to affect legal change is Roy's mother, Lynn. Since Carter was found guilty in connection with her son's death, Lynn has been working to criminalize suicide coercion in Massachusetts. And again, she is a grieving woman. She is a grieving mother. I am not going to attack her. You know, it is extremely common for the parent of a deceased child to go and, you know, have a mission based on how their child died. We see it all the time with victims of school shootings, etc. And so I don't want to fault her for that. Certainly, so that she doesn't kill herself, she probably needs to feel like there was purpose in her son's death. But I think criminalizing suicide coercion it can be a very slippery slope. I think we need to tread lightly when it comes to that and what constitutes suicidal coercion. Because again, I would like to talk to experts here, but I do not believe that it's really possible unless it's like you had kidnapped someone and you were holding them hostage for months, and so then you have like control over their mind in a way that has been psychologically proven. Then you can put a knife in front of them or gun in front of them and tell them to kill themselves. But right now, like I think this is a very interesting and gray area. The legislation dubbed Conrad's Law would impose a punishment of up to 5 years for anyone convicted of pressuring another to die by suicide. Massachusetts is currently one of only 8 U.S. states that do not criminalize suicide coercion. As of August 2023, the bill was awaiting passage in the state House of Representatives, according to the Fall River Reporter. With this tragedy, my son would want me to help other people, other families, Lynn told People magazine. If we get the law passed when we do, that's going to be a win for me, for him. I just want my son to be proud of me. I think that's interesting. I think that it's interesting that she chose, for her work to be in criminalizing suicide coercion rather than, helping young people with their mental health. And I know that sounded cunty when I just said it. I'm not meaning it in a targeted way. That's just truly what I'm thinking. Because it feels something, I don't know, it just feels a little more anger fueled, I guess. But again, I don't want to start that conversation because I am against critiquing people on how they experience grief. But yeah, it really reminded me of that. And I wanted to talk about that because I just think that's such an interesting without a country-esque topic. And on a lighter note, Nacho Bitches is tomorrow. We already sold more than half the room out. We have an incredible lineup. Nacho Bitches, if you haven't been following me for a long time, is a show that I started with Blair Saki in 2014, right at the start of GWF at New York Comedy Club. It's, it started the real big, relationship that I have with New York Comedy Club, who has been so good to me over the years. And we used to do this show once a month on Friday night. And it was definitely my most favorite live comedy show that I've ever been a part of. And I, outside of like GWF stuff, but like, as far as just like a pure stand-up show, I love Nacho Bitches dearly. And, Blair Saki, is in New York. And this is, I think, the only show that she's doing while she's here. So it's a great opportunity to see Blair. She's such a wonderful comic, a good friend of mine. And we have a stellar lineup on the show, like truly so much bang for your buck. These are all, not every single person on this show is a national headliner who sells out our own shows all over the country and all over the world all the time. So you are getting to see so many incredible people. We have Rosebud Baker, we have Lisa Traeger, we have Ian Fidance. And what's special about this lineup is these are all people who, when they were young comics, regularly were on our show, and now they have all gone on to become successful solo comedians in their own right, and they're all famous, and they're all so talented. And I really recommend you coming out to Nacho Bitches. It is tomorrow, New York Comedy Club, Midtown, which is the East 24th Street location, and the show is at 9:15 p.m. All right, let's go forward to our Patreon. Our Patreon members, all hail to our amazing dictator, Christopher Fungi, our newest cutie, A, just going by A. Welcome, A. Thank you so much for being here. And hello, of course, to all my capitalist pigs and my cuties. I love you guys so much. You help support the show through your generous donations. And thanks to anyone who's here. I appreciate everyone, whether you have the monetary means to contribute financially or you don't. You can contribute in so many ways: by watching the show, by talking about the show, by posting about the show, by following the show on Instagram, subscribing on YouTube. Like, these are all amazing ways. But if you want to financially support the show, if you love free speech, if you love conversations about the news, if you still have the attention span to consume long form content, I love you so much. And you can head over to patreon.com/withoutacountry. And you can become a subscriber for as little as $6 a month. And you do get an additional news story every Thursday that the rest of the people cannot see. And we discuss fun things. And here's the part of the show where Alfred licks his crotch. I know you people will probably like, does this guy have a medical issue? We have a lavender spray, but I think he just honestly finds great joy. He's been licking his crotch since the day I adopted him. I think he just finds great joy in it. And you know what? I support you. I'm sorry, I don't mean to call you out, but you are doing it on camera. So I feel like this is not, revenge porn or anything, my guy, my little buddy. All right, let's head into the Wacko mailbag right now. This is like kind of a light one, but just because there was so much discussion when, as Joe Biden aged in office, I certainly don't want to now not pay attention to it as Donald Trump ages in office. And I would argue that he's doing things a lot more serious than, taking a tumble. So here we go. Oh no, we've lost the mouse. And where is the mouse? Damn it. Sorry. All right, here we go. Sometimes the mouse just disappears when you're live streaming. I just want to bypass this paywall real quick. I thought I had already bypassed it, but here we are. So this is basically like about what happened for Donald Trump on Easter. It's not a long article, but it says Trump rambles to confuse kids about Biden's auto pen. So there's been footage circulating of Donald Trump being at, the Easter egg roll or whatever they fucking do on the Great Lawn. And he keeps talking as he signs something. He keeps talking about how Biden would have used an auto pen if he was signing autographs, and how, Trump, he was using a regular pen. And then you're like thinking like, who is he mumbling this to? Which world leader is he talking to? And then you see who he's talking to, and he's literally surrounded by a group of children, no one who looks to be older than like 6 years old. What? One confused kid could be heard responding. It wasn't clear whether he was too young to know about the former president, Joe Biden, or didn't know what an auto pen was. He'd have an auto pen follow him, Joe Biden, told the group, comma, Joe Biden. So he's even speaking in things that don't exactly make sense. Trump told the group he didn't sign. He was incapable of signing things. So they'd follow him around with a big machine. You know what this was called? An auto pen. So he's basically doing like a Mr. Rogers style informational session with kids, but it was anti-Joe Biden introduction to the auto pen. But the president was, when I think about it, I'm like, I guess in theory, when they brought up auto pen, obviously I immediately knew what they meant. But like, did I know that it was like something that actually existed? I don't think I ever really thought about it. But the president was not done talking about the auto pen as the children continued with their activities. Quote, and he'd have the auto pen sign for him. He'd take the paper, hand it to his guys, sign it with an auto pen, give it back. Trump told the confused children, not too good, right? As he spoke, some of the children looked around as if they were no longer interested in hearing what the president had to say. I mean, so again, just a bizarre thing to tell children, and a bizarre to be critiquing someone who, in your opinion, was too elderly to sign his own name, and you to be old and senile and apparently not have the wherewithal to know that this is not a conversation that is relevant to children or appropriate for children, I would argue. All right. Let's the theme of today's show is feminism and suicide, methinks. We're going to go into the Wacko mailbag. Or continue going through the Wacko mailbag, because that last one was from Wacko Guy, and his name is Guy, not just a guy. And this is from Wacko, my mom, from NewJersey.com. I feel like she loves it. She loves a NewJersey.com article. No one reads NewJersey.com more than Di-Fi. But honestly, I do follow NewJersey.com on Instagram, and they are great. Like if you're interested in what's happening in New Jersey, NewJersey.com. So a woman tried to die by suicide. These New Jersey cops made sure she lived. So this is a positive municipal story about cops actually handling mental health, crisis correctly, which, they so often do not, which is like yet another reason not to call the cops when someone, is threatening to kill themselves. Cause it's like, what are they going to make a sharp move and then they're going to die, by suicide by cop? A South Brunswick police sergeant deployed a taser on Friday night to stop a woman having a mental health crisis from killing herself, officials said. The police chief said the incident is noteworthy because of the cops' actions in being able to save the woman's life in what could have ended in a use of deadly force. South Brunswick police responded to a home on Kingston Lane at about 7:30 p.m. after getting a call that a woman stabbed herself in the neck and abdomen and was trying to kill herself. So she was really trying to kill herself. When officers arrived, they found the bleeding woman standing in a dark bathroom off the kitchen and holding a knife. She told Sergeant Jared Harpster that she wanted to end her life, according to police. Harpster began talking with the woman, trying to convince her to drop the knife. Sergeant Brooke Label also took part in the conversation with the woman. The woman only gave limited responses and after several minutes began walking out of the bathroom, the knife in her right hand at waist level. Both sergeants asked the woman to drop the knife and stop moving towards them. The woman then stopped speaking and stepped into the kitchen as the sergeants took steps back, police said. Label deployed her Axon taser when, and I'll just reiterate, Label deployed her. So when we can tell, why do we think the situation was handled with empathy? Her Axon taser when the woman walked within 7 feet of the police with the knife pointed at them. The shock from the taser dropped the woman to the floor. The sergeants and officer Dale Hubner took the knife from the woman and began treating her. While her injuries are serious, she is expected to make a full recovery. This woman was in crisis, and these officers went above and beyond to save her life. She was looking to force these officers into using deadly force. This is a case everyone needs to know about because a woman is alive today as a result of the actions of the officers. And now, let me see. I mean, does it give her to stop a woman? Let me see. Sorry. Basically, what I'm trying to look into. So they're not giving the name, of the woman, which is nice. But I wanted to know, my next question is, was this woman who was trying to kill herself white or black or something else? But basically I wanted to see if the woman is black because based on the officer's behavior, I feel like she's probably white, which is really unfucking unfortunate. But it makes you think like if it's a different scenario where this woman is black and she's approaching officers after wounding herself, but with a knife, are they then using deadly force? You would hope not, but I feel like maybe. All South Brunswick police officers have received integrating communications, assessment, and tactics, ICAT training, a department spokesman said. ICAT training teaches officers how to de-escalate situations involving people in mental health crises or those armed with weapons other than guns. Harpster is an instructor for the class. South Brunswick police also participate in Arrive Together, a state pilot program that teams law enforcement officers with mental health professionals. The counselor has been instrumental in providing assistance to people and insights for officers, the department spokesperson said. And, it is crazy to me that this program is a program that does not exist for all police officers because de-escalating and dealing with someone in a mental health crisis is something that all officers obviously need training in and deserve training in so that they can serve properly. And then the last thing, this isn't from the Wacko mailbag. This is moving on to domestic violence. I just thought this was of note. Something very weird is happening in Kenosha. In Kenosha County, something really weird is happening, and it's domestic violence. This is from Kenosha Today. Domestic violence homicides shake Kenosha community. 2 killings in 9 days prompt concern and outreach from local advocacy group. The Kenosha community is reeling after 2 domestic violence homicides occurred just 9 days apart. Michaela Plaza, a 28-year-old domestic violence advocate, was allegedly killed by her partner, Marcus Plaza, on April 1st. This tragedy came shortly after the March 23rd killing of 37-year-old Amber Montana, allegedly by her partner, Brandon Hall. The back-to-back incidents have prompted an uptick in calls to the local advocacy group Women and Children's Horizons, which is working to support those affected by the violence. Why it matters: domestic violence remains a persistent and deadly issue, with victims often facing increased risks from their own partners. These two high-profile killings in Kenosha County have shaken the community and highlighted the ongoing need for domestic violence prevention and support services, even for those with specialized knowledge like Michaela Plaza. And I mean, obviously, like, domestic violence resulting in death is always a problem, but I just think, with this just really felt like, it needed to be pointed out. And Kenosha, for those who don't know, is in Wisconsin. Michaela Plaza, let's see. Michaela Plaza, a 28-year-old domestic violence advocate at Women and Children's Horizons, which makes this that more interesting, was allegedly killed by her partner, Marcus Plaza, on April 1st. Their children were in the home at the time. Marcus Plaza has been charged with first-degree intentional homicide and is being held on a $2 million cash bond. Just 9 days earlier, 37-year-old Amber Montana was allegedly killed by her partner, Brandon Hall, 35, in Twin Lakes. Hall has been charged with first-degree intentional homicide, recklessly endangering safety, and possession of a firearm by a felon. That's always a problem. And what they're saying. So, Michaela Plaza was killed April 1st, 2026. Amber Montana, again, March 23rd, 2026. And these are some quotes from people. This is from Sue Sapel, the director of Women and Children's Horizons. Quote, "She had taken the knowledge, she understood domestic violence, but knowledge and understanding doesn't make you immune to domestic violence. That can happen to anyone, including people who are employed or were employed in a domestic violence program." Sue also says it is concerning that there have been multiple domestic violence homicides in a short period of time, and that we have seen definitely an uptick in calls, not only from Kenosha County, but from some of the surrounding counties, because people have seen the stories on the media. What's next? Women and Children's Horizons is continuing to provide free and confidential services to those affected by domestic violence, including emergency shelter, legal advocacy, and a 24-hour crisis hotline. The takeaway: these tragic domestic violence homicides in Kenosha County highlight the ongoing need for robust support services and community awareness around this persistent issue. Even those with specialized knowledge, like Michaela Plaza, can fall victim to domestic violence, underscoring the importance of prevention efforts and resources for all. So just keep that in mind. And a great organization if you or someone you know is going through a domestic violence situation. I know a lot of times it takes a couple of tries to get out of that situation, whether it's you or someone you love. And so don't give up on yourself, or don't give up on someone that you love if they're going through this. The number one thing abusers try to do in a situation like that is to isolate the person that they're abusing from their friends and family. So even if it's hard for you to stay connected to someone who you think is keeping themselves in harm's way, know that, like, it's really hard to get out of these situations. The cycle of abuse does involve, so much apologizing and saying you're sorry and saying that I still love you. So for someone who perhaps is unclear of, what healthy love and partnership looks like, it can be really difficult to exit a situation like that. And we don't want to leave people when they're experiencing their lowest lows. Speaking of lowest lows, did our president hit it this week? Now we're going to go right into our main story, and then we'll go into girl after. But one of our main stories today, or the main story, I put the Marjorie Taylor Greene's replacement as the second thing, but the main story of today is definitely what's going on with Iran, and of course, how Trump threatened to end an entire civilization, which is cute. I don't know what the hell he's going for. That man has, that man lost his mind a long time ago. So I don't want to say that he lost his mind. Alfred, do you need a little bed? This is from Axios. Trump threatens whole civilization will die tonight amid 11th hour Iran negotiations. We know this has since gone away, but this is so recent that I did think that we couldn't possibly do an episode without talking about the fact that he said that. So fucking horrific. All right, so here, bypassing again. All right. Sorry, I took all of these things out of here. And then Mike, can you bypass this paywall and bring it up on the screen? I'm having problems with the thing that I'm using to bypass the paywall. It keeps giving me a lot of crazy crap. Because if I could read it off your screen, it would be a little bit easier. The Axios article. And we know that, Trump was posting this on Truth Social because he loves a Truth Social post. All right, good. You could scroll down to the start of the article, please. And so President Trump threatened on Tuesday to wipe out the entire Iranian civilization if the regime doesn't meet his 8 p.m. Eastern time deadline for reopening the Strait of Hormuz. The big picture, Trump's new threat, which was the most harrowing in a series of public warnings to Iran, seems to be part of an effort to convince Tehran the risks of not making a swift deal are too dire to countenance. And we talked about the Strait of Hormuz at length last week. As we know, it was, Mike's biggest story of the week, his pick for biggest story of the week. Iran has accused Trump of planning to commit war crimes. The regime has not shown much flexibility around a deal in public comments. Those sources tell Axios there has been some progress behind the scenes in the past 48 hours. Vice President Vance, who is involved in the Iran diplomacy, said at a press conference in Budapest on Tuesday that intense negotiations would take place up to Trump's deadline. I am hopeful it will get to a good resolution, he said. What he said, a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will, Trump wrote on Truth Social. He added that he hopes this could still change if the different, smarter, and less radicalized leaders of Iran prevail. Who knows? We will find out tonight. We're really on the edge of our seats here. One of the most important moments in the long and complex history of the world, Trump wrote. He is trying so hard to be relevant. Trump previously threatened to destroy Iran's bridges and power plants on Tuesday night if no deal was reached, and has mentioned other targets like oil and water infrastructure. State of play in another move that appears to be part of the U.S. pressure campaign. The U.S. military on Tuesday morning attacked dozens of military targets on the strategic Karg Island. A U.S. official said that the strikes were not directed at oil export infrastructure on the island and said that the attacks were restrikes on military targets that were previously in the war. So that's just to catch you up on what happened. Obviously, we know there has been, resolution, in the moment since this happened, but just to catch everyone up. And then Associated Press, apnews.com, is doing live updates. Right now, the headline reads, live updates, Iran accuses U.S. of violating parts of deal framework, says that the ceasefire is unreasonable. So, of course, already a problem. And these are the major developments that they're following. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf said Wednesday that a ceasefire and negotiations within the U.S. on ending the war is unreasonable, as he accused the U.S. of violating 3 of Tehran's 10 conditions for an end to the fighting. It comes as the not yet day-old ceasefire appears at risk of fraying over significant disagreements between the parties. So not uncommon, not unlike, the many ceasefire in quotes deals between Israel and Palestine. The United States and Iran both claimed victory today, after the two countries and Israel agreed to a 2-week ceasefire to halt more than a month of war, even as more drones and missiles hit the Islamic Republic and Gulf Arab states. Israel has pushed forward its war against the Hezbollah militant group in Lebanon, striking dense commercial and residential areas of Beirut without warning. Lebanon said at least 182 people were killed and hundreds were wounded, making it the deadliest day in the latest Israel-Hezbollah war. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said early Wednesday that the ceasefire deal doesn't cover fighting against Hezbollah, contradicting what Pakistan, the deal's broker, and other nations had said. Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz in response to Israeli attacks on Lebanon, and the U.S. demanded that Iran immediately reopen it. All sides have presented vastly different versions of the terms. In one instance, Iran said that the deal would allow it to formalize its new practice of charging ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz, which the White House said U.S. President Donald Trump opposes. And this in and of itself is kind of crazy, because it's like, well, okay, if there is specific ceasefire terms and conditions, wouldn't this be written down somewhere? And wouldn't everyone have the same copy? Pakistan said talks to seek a permanent end to the war could begin in Islamabad as soon as Friday. The White House confirmed that U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance will lead the U.S. negotiating team. All right, so that's just an update on everything that is going on. Now, again, I do argue that it's the biggest story of the week, but I also, think it's something that is pretty matter of fact, except for obviously the terms of the ceasefire. But that's not something that is, Republican, Democrat. That's something that it's like, depending on who you ask, depending on what party you ask, and party meaning just like group, not political party. All right, let's go into Girl now, where we will also go over a little bit later on Marjorie Taylor Greene's replacement, Clay Fuller, who we went to his website a few weeks ago on the show, and we know that he was Trump-backed, and we know that Georgia was having a special election, and we know that his family loves faith. And I love sugar-free root beer. So when we head into Girl, there's been a lot of talk about Congressman Eric Swalwell this week. And I first learned about his accusations or accusations against him that he was harassing multiple women from a lot of like political content creators on the left that I follow. So I said, what's happening with Eric Swalwell? I got to look into this a little bit more. And I don't feel like enough actual, written news outlets are talking about this, but I'm going to be talking about it. And this is from nationaltoday.com. Group of women accuse Representative Swalwell of harassment. Allegations come amid ongoing scrutiny over Swalwell's past ties to Chinese spy Fang. And a lot of people think like that is orchestrated, the Chinese spy Fang thing. And so I'm sure then it'll devolve into everyone calling these women liars, as it always does when it comes to sexual harassment. A group of women have come forward with allegations of harassment against Representative Eric Swalwell, a Democratic congressman from California. The accusations come as Swalwell continues to face scrutiny over his past relationship with a suspected Chinese spy named Fang when he was a city council member in Dublin, California. Which is like, honestly, just impressive for a city council member to have such ties, If I'm trying to get someone to a higher office, I go, this guy was friends with a Chinese spy named Fang when he was only in city council. Imagine what he could do in a higher office. Why it matters, the allegations against Swalwell, a prominent Democratic politician, could have significant political implications and further damage his reputation, which has already been tarnished by the Fang scandal. The story also highlights the ongoing challenges of addressing harassment and misconduct in the political sphere. We talked about how we saw this in Kat Abughazele's race against the former mayor who ended up winning the race against her, and how it had really not affected him at all. Although this Eric Swalwell is a series of accusations that seem to be a lot more pressing, or a lot more just like a lot bigger. The details. According to reports, the group of women alleged that Swalwell engaged in inappropriate behavior and unwanted advances during his time as a local politician in Dublin. The specific details of the allegations have not been made public, but the women claim that they have evidence to support their claims. Swalwell was a city council member in Dublin, California in the early 2010s. In 2015, Swalwell was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, where he has served since. What they're saying, the allegations against Congressman Swalwell are deeply concerning and must be taken seriously. We call on him to fully cooperate with any investigation into this matter. That's a quote from Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. And then what's next? Swalwell has not yet responded publicly to the allegations. It is expected that the women will file formal complaints, which could trigger an investigation by the House Ethics Committee. says the takeaway: the accusations against Swalwell highlight the ongoing challenges of addressing harassment and misconduct in politics, especially for prominent figures. The story also underscores the continued scrutiny Swalwell faces over his past ties to a suspected Chinese spy. I love these little like takeaway buttons at the end of news articles for like, I guess they're for people who lack reading comprehension, which, as we went over last week in the dictator story, is a lot of us. It's a lot of us. But I just think let's put a pin in that. Again, I don't see enough people talking about that story. I know some people are arguing that there is some type of an attack going on right now with Eric Swalwell, but that's a lot of people and, believe women. So next story from Girl. This is something that I really mostly saw online, which makes sense for this type of a story. It's talking about Palantir. We're talking about a Jewish group, these kinds of things. This is I had to go to religiousnewsservice.com to get this article, but Jewish protesters hold Passover Seder at Palantir's New York headquarters over ICE contract. After Mayor Zoran Mamdani made a brief appearance, some demonstrators traveled to the Palantir headquarters where about 15 protesters were arrested. Hundreds of protesters gathered at Union Square in Manhattan on Monday afternoon, April 6th, for a Passover Seder to protest the Trump administration's immigration policies and corporations working with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The demonstration, organized by Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, ended in front of the nearby headquarters of the technological giant Palantir. An ICE contractor since 2011, Palantir has a $30 million contract with the Agency for Immigration OS, a platform tracking self-deportations and visa overstays. As hundreds of protesters chanted, "Shut down Palantir" and "Let my people go" outside of the building, a dozen held a sit-in in the lobby. The group, all wearing T-shirts reading "Abolish ICE," gathered around a black banner that read "ICE kidnaps, Palantir profits, let my people go." Shortly after the protesters arrived in front of the headquarters, the New York Police Department entered the building and arrested about 15 protesters, according to JFREJ Rabbi Abby Stein, formerly part-time rabbi of Brooklyn's Progressive Kolat Shayanu congregation, was among the protesters who held the sit-in. And Abby Stein, she's a very famous rabbi in New York, like very famous activist, does a lot of work. You're probably familiar with her if you're local. As Jews and as New Yorkers, we know all too well that when one group of people is surveilled, we are all in danger. Rabbi Rachel Goldenberg, founder of the Progressive Queens congregation Malkut, told the crowd parked in front of the company's headquarters. Monday's demonstration was part of JFREJ's Seder in the Streets, one of the group's longstanding Passover traditions. In 2024, JFREJ held one to denounce the Biden administration's support for Israel's military campaign in Gaza. Last year, its members joined a Seder in the Street organized by the anti-Zionist group Jewish Voice for Peace to advocate for the release of Mahmoud Khalil, a Palestinian student placed in ICE detention for his role in pro-Palestinian protests at Columbia University. JFREJ doesn't, quote, take a position on Zionism. Passover, which is from April 1st to April 9th this year, we're still in it, commemorates the Exodus, the Jewish people's journey out of Egypt. During the holiday, Jewish families gather for Seder ceremonies meant to recount the story of the Exodus as told in the Haggadah, the Passover Seder booklet. Participants also eat bitter herbs and flatbread called matzo, which symbolize parts of the history. Seder in the Streets events trace their roots to the 1969 Freedom Seder that brought together Jewish and African American activists to denounce the Vietnam War and the oppression of Black people. Sophie Elman-Golan, JFREJ's communications director, said organizers chose to dedicate this year's Seder to protesting ICE because Passover's story of liberation brought them to consider those currently held in detention. We can't celebrate a liberation holiday when so many of our neighbors are in captivity right now or hiding in their homes because ICE is terrorizing them. We want an end to corporate collaboration and profiteering off of people's pain, she said. At Union Square, the group gathered around a large round banner representing the Seder plate, painted in blue, reading Melt Ice. Attendees held other banners reading Jews Against Deportation and wore black t-shirts that said, we're not going back or abolish ICE. New York Mayor Zoran Mamdani made an appearance alongside Felicia Wisdom, executive director of the mayor's office to combat anti-Semitism, at the Union Square gathering. During his brief address, the mayor said that the story of Passover generated hope for many oppressed groups. I know that in this moment, for many New Yorkers, that freedom feels out of reach, whether it be freedom from a suffocating cost of living crisis, freedom from a rising tide of anti-Semitism, or freedom from the brutality of ICE, Mamdani said. The first Muslim to serve as New York's mayor, he also praised JFREJ's efforts to combat the rising tide of Islamophobia in the city. He was joined by other city officials, including former controller Brad Lander, who is Jewish, and Aliyah Latif, executive director of the mayor's office of faith-based partnerships. Rabbi Ellen Lippman, co-founder of Kolat Shayanu, who led the evening's liturgy, told participants the plight of immigrants resonated with Jewish diaspora communities because of their own story of migration, but also because of the Passover story. If this holiday teaches us anything, it is that a better liberated future is possible, one with no loopholes or carve-outs, and this time nobody will be left behind, said the rabbi, who also serves as the co-chair of the board of Teruah, a Jewish human rights organization. The group focused most of the evening on singing, bringing together liberation songs from different social justice movements and the Jewish Mizrahi tradition. The group sang Let My People Go Down Moses, which was rewritten for a fundraising campaign to bail people out of ICE detention in 2020. And This Is For Our Families, which was sung by protesters in Minneapolis during ICE's Operation Metro Surge in January. After sharing matzah, the group proceeded with the ritualistic blessing of the 4 cups. As he blessed the 3rd cup of wine, Lander noted he had long struggled with God's commandment to kill the firstborn of each Egyptian family as one of the plagues sent to Egypt. Lander, who is running for Congress, said a medieval midrash or rabbinic commentary helped him understand that Jews protected Egyptian children during the 10th plague. That's a question we asked at our Seder table this year, Lander said. Would we take the children of Egyptian families, of Palestinian families, of Iranian families, of Lebanese families, of Venezuelan families, of Cuban families into our home? I mean, I hope so. I mean, again, I'm saying this as yes, but I think, depending on who you ask, the answer could be no, but let's hope that we would take any child anywhere into our homes if they needed help. And I wouldn't really be asking what their background was. I would just say, hey, come in. You're a fucking child. Crazy times we're living in. All right. Okay. So this is another one. Again, it's kind of like a very deathy episode, very morbid, macabre. But the next article that I thought was just very without a country. Didn't see it a lot of places. Unfortunately, the place I did see it was the New York Post. But we gotta go to the New York Post when we want to. Oh, also speaking of the New York Post followed us all day this past weekend when I was doing the Epstein egg hunt with Disrupt, and the headline was something like liberals spend the day before Easter running around the city for $200 or something. But I was like, you know what, whatever. We got press. Any press is press when you're trying to make a movement happen, right? So this article is from the New York Post. As I said, promising dental student died in ICU overseen by remote telehealth physician, declared dead via video, lawsuit. I think this is very, very interesting. A 26-year-old promising dental student died in a Connecticut hospital's intensive care unit that was being overseen by a telehealth doctor who pronounced him dead via a video call, a lawsuit alleges. Connor Hilton's family slapped the wrongful death lawsuit on Bridgeport Hospital Milford campus last month for allegedly not having a doctor physically on site when he was admitted to the ICU in August 2024, according to the filing. which is crazy to not have a doctor on site in an ICU. Hilton, who was studying at UConn School of Dental Medicine, took a turn for the worse in the hours after he went to the hospital seeking treatment for pancreatitis and a slew of other conditions. In the 4 hours he was in the ICU, Hilton was never examined by an on-site doctor, despite his condition worsening the lawsuit charges. They violated hospital policy because no on-site doctor assessed Mr. Hilton from the time he was admitted to the ICU until after he exhibited seizure-like activity at 4:30 a.m., the court docs state. Instead, the hospital allegedly relied on off-site tele-ICU providers to care for its patients. And I think this, I try to look through my brain to see if I think this is the first time when I read this article earlier today that I have ever even been aware that having an off-site telehealth provider in an ICU is a thing. Mike, had you heard of this before? Is this something that was in your world that you knew about?
No, this is the kind of thing I see on Instagram and then send it to you with the caption "hell."
Mm-hmm,
We are living in hell.
Yeah. Eventually, he'll and we know, listen, I've spent a lot of times in hospitals in the past, couple of years, and they love cutting a corner. They love cutting a corner, and they love sending in, a series of nurses who are overworked. I understand, underpaid. I understand, but even though I can hold empathy for those workers while still holding empathy for myself and my family, in saying that a lot of people who we saw during my dad's time in hospitals, rehabs, and hospice were just not equipped to be doing the job that they were doing. And they would come in, people would switch shifts, they're just getting paperwork. Seemingly, I don't even know if they were reading it fully. They never knew what was going on. They didn't know what the medicines that they were administering even did. I know this because I did my own research by one time just asking a nurse before she was going to give my dad medicine. I said, "Oh, what are you administering?" She told me the name of it. And then I said, "And what does that do?" Which I think is a pretty simple follow-up question that if you're administering something, you should know what it's meant for. And she said, "I don't know." And then I said, "Well, then let's not administer that until you figure it out." Eventually, Hilton slid down in bed, his eyes rolled back, and he exhibited seizure-like activity, vomited, became bradycardic, and code was called, the suit said. He was intubated, but he could not be resuscitated, and he was pronounced dead. The pronouncement was done by a telehealth provider on a video screen, the suit added. Hilton's family claims that the hospital never even told them that the dental student had been admitted to the ICU. The hospital allowed for extremely poor communication among the providers responsible for Connor's life, which is especially dangerous to patient care when the hospital is relying on off-site ICU providers to care for its patients, the complaint alleged. I mean, again, I don't want to be fear-mongering, and I am certainly not someone who's, who I don't fear hospitals. I'm not someone who's going to try to avoid going to a hospital at all costs, but you really are putting your life in the hands of, it's a crapshoot who you're going to get. And, a lot of times it's one or two people's decision that is being made swiftly that is going to determine whether you or your loved one live or die. And a lot of times the decision is not one that the family agrees with. And I mean, hospitals be getting sued nonstop. They're just hit with lawsuits, every day. Obviously, a lot of that is pain. A lot of that is anger. But in this instance, I say they really got a case on their hands. A Bridgeport hospital spokesperson told the Hartford Courant it was aware of the lawsuit and was committed to providing the safest and highest quality of care possible, which is, obviously a bullshit PR response. The hospital confirmed it utilizes telehealth professionals, claiming it enhances the treatment of critically ill patients by pairing advanced virtual monitoring with expert bedside teams. I would say it's not expert if you're going 4 hours in the ICU without seeing a doctor in real life. I would say that you're probably skimping and you probably need to hire more doctors. A dedicated virtual, let's not forget hospitals are businesses, babies. A dedicated virtual team collaborates closely with on-site nurses, physicians, and ICU intensivists to provide continuous monitoring, timely decisions, and coordinated high-quality care through the ICU stay, the spokesperson said. So that's I'm interested to see how that case pans out for sure. Another article, another big thing this week, and I think this happened like right after last week's episode aired, pretty soon after. The great Pam Bondi was fired, and my mom, feminist that she is, her first thought before any of these articles came out was she's like, obviously most of Trump's administration, including himself, are pretty incompetent. But what is of note is that the first people many times to get fired are the women in these situations, and they are then replaced by men. And, obviously that, gives you a little more information on why I am the way I am. But then I found this Slate article from April 3rd that bounces off Di-Fi's thoughts. And it says there's a clear pattern to who Trump throws under the bus. And this is by Jill Filipovic. Recent ousters tell us something important about this president, his administration, and his movement. Oh my God, again, we're going to have to bypass the paywall. I set this up to bypass the paywall every time, and then it undoes what I do. All right. So Pam Bondi is out as Attorney General, the latest in a line of high-profile Trump administration women to be sacked in recent weeks. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was fired in early March. Centers for Disease Control Director Susan Monares was fired in August, even though she had only been confirmed a few weeks earlier. National Intelligence Head Tulsi Gabbard is still in her role, but the president has reportedly been polling other cabinet members on whether he should oust her. And earlier this week, President Donald Trump told Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt that she was, quote, doing a terrible job, blaming her for the 93% bad publicity his administration has received. And let me just stop there and say, I hate Caroline Leavitt. I do. But if we're going to talk about someone who has gone above and beyond to lie and verbally navigate her way on behalf of the president around the terrible things that he is doing and the terrible job he is in fact doing, it is our girl Caroline Leavitt. Caroline Leavitt is going to bat every single day for Donald Trump and this administration. So this is beyond fucked. Again, similar to like my thoughts on Erica Kirk, like I hate Caroline Leavitt. I don't think she's a good person. But do I think she's doing a good job? Fuck yeah, I think she's doing a good job. I think she's doing a great job. I think Caroline Leavitt deserves a raise. Leavitt, who is pregnant, is set to take leave beginning in May. Trump watchers are wondering if she'll last that long. For a cabinet that was largely male and almost entirely white to begin with, it's interesting to see the women get picked off one by one. And as a female comedian, this article really resonated with me because this is something that I talk about, especially it's information I like to share with younger female comedians who are just starting out, because I think all female comedians, are guilty of this, and beginning myself included, that there's a part of us who gets convinced that if we, go on a male podcast and we ingratiate ourselves to, these male comics, and we try to see their point of view when they are just spouting misogyny and the tenets of the patriarchy, whether it be in plain view or, a little bit more in a way that you have to read between the lines. Like, there's no reason for us to do that, because in the beginning it will help you a little bit, but ultimately if you ever so much as see even a piece of the fame that these male comedians want to see, they will make sure that you never see the light of day again. They will not help you after a certain point. They certainly will never let you surpass them. They're not going to think of you when they, if they get a TV show or if they go on a comedy tour. Like, these things are not happening. So, we must always first and foremost make sure that we are being good women. And I know when Republicans say good women, we mean women who are quiet and women who procreate and women who listen to their husbands. But when I say good women, I mean women who, not women who don't look out for men, but women who first and foremost look out for each other, because it's us, who are so often the prey. Anyway, back to the article. For a cabinet that was largely male and almost entirely white to begin with, it's interesting to see the women get picked off one by one. When Trump casts around for someone to blame, there's a clear pattern to who he zeroes in on. Trump has pushed out men too, but for the most part, only after spectacular screw-ups or when they're like targeting him directly. And even then, some of the biggest screw-ups remain in their roles. And these men were largely not actually given the public acts and not made to endure the resulting public humiliation. Former Border Patrol head Greg Bovino oversaw a disastrous immigration and customs enforcement incursion into Minnesota that led to the public killings of 2 U.S. citizens, sparking mass protests. Even after all of that, he was simply moved back to his previous role in California and allowed to quietly retire. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz accidentally added the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic to a private signal chat about bombing Yemen. He was removed from his national security post, but made ambassador to the United Nations. Other men who have made colossal errors have retained their posts. Pete Hegseth is the one who decided to send war plans and other sensitive classified information to his colleagues, his wife, and his brother on Signal in the first place, and he remains in charge of the Department of Defense and continues to insist on calling it, ridiculously, as Mike pointed out last week, the Department of War. Stephen Miller is one of the administration's most odious members and a near constant source of public embarrassment. He was also, by most accounts, the one actually pulling the strings at Noam's Department of Homeland Security and setting the administration's immigration policies, including spreading the lie that Alex Pretty, the U.S. citizen who was gunned down in the street by ICE agents, was a, quote, assassin planning a massacre. And if Miller is the administration's most odious, FBI Director Kash Patel is its most buffoonish. He has raced to social media to announce the capture of suspects in 2 high-profile shootings, that of Charlie Kirk and that at Brown University, before any suspect was actually apprehended. Iranian intelligence has gotten into his Gmail, where he had forwarded emails from his Justice Department account. He took an FBI jet to Italy so that he could party with the American hockey team at the Olympics, all with U.S. taxpayers footing the bill. He has instructed SWAT teams to accompany his 27-year-old country singer girlfriend, he's 46, to hair appointments. Any one of those stories would have been a career ender in previous administrations. The second Trump administration has seen far less churn than the first. That's in part because this time around, Trump appointed a slate of hardcore loyalists. Those include Pam Bondi, who bent over backward to serve the president, even when it meant bending the law too. And the lack of churn has also been credited to the White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, who by most accounts has enforced significant restraint from a famously chaotic leader. Wiles, though, was recently diagnosed with breast cancer, and while she has remained in her role, her influence may not be quite as forceful as it once was. Trump's second term has seen a surprising number of women at the highest levels. 1/3 of cabinet and cabinet level appointees have been women, still less than the proportion of women in the cabinets of Joe Biden, Barack Obama, and second term Bill Clinton, but more than Republican presidents before him. Those numbers, though, seem to be quickly declining. Conservative misogynist men have long made women a deal. Play by our rules, submit to men, don't challenge their authority, be anti-feminist mouthpieces who are not like other girls, and will protect you and might even promote you. Again, I can't tell you how just like this is exactly what it's like being a female comedian. No doubt Bondi, Noam, and the other well-behaved women of Trump world thought that they were holding up their end of the bargain. But the new right, of which Trump is the deity-like figurehead, if not exactly a philosophical or intellectual guru, is notoriously sexist and not in the facially benevolent way of the old Christian right. On the new right, the ethos of, quote, we need to put women in their place has taken hold. Women embody empathy, which the right has decided is toxic. Their presence in public life is precisely what has made America ungreat. Prominent conservative thinkers, including Scott Yenor at the Heritage Foundation, have suggested that it should be legal to discriminate against women in hiring and pay by allowing employers to only hire male heads of household. White supremacist Nick Fuentes, who enjoys a large following on the right, has argued that just as Hitler imprisoned gypsies and Jews, we have to do the same thing with women. They go to the breeding gulags. The utter woman hate of his movement was recently captured in a blockbuster New York Magazine piece by Sam Adler Bell, who writes, a growing group of right-wing women, both prominent personalities and loyal foot soldiers, are waking up to find their incursion in the MAGA movement was contingent. Sexism wasn't merely the price of entry, it was the theme of the party. And also what they didn't even mention up top is like, obviously all these people in his cabinet, but like Marjorie Taylor Greene is another great example. You know, she was, friendly with Trump. And then all of a sudden when she started questioning things, about the Epstein files, when she, pointed out different things and kind of said like, if you guys don't release this information, I'm going to tell on all of you. Very quickly, she became Marjorie Taylor Greene's a bad girl. She's a little bad girl and she should be sent to her room. And, there's many things I don't like about Marjorie Taylor Greene, but I think, compared to a lot of other women in this administration, I don't align with many of her viewpoints, but at least it seemed like she was speaking up a lot more and standing up for herself. And, that ultimately, got her bullied out. I don't know. She's no longer, in Congress, but is it because she was bullied out, forced out, threatened out, because she really wanted to, she didn't want to handle it anymore? I don't really know. No wonder high ranking.
What about, sorry,
Jesus,
I'm
it's
sorry.
frightening.
I wanted to jump in before you got back to reading the article. What about the fact that Kristi Noem, dragged before Congress, made a mockery of for this plane, that she got, that was almost certainly being used as an aerial love chateau for her second in command, right? We covered this time and time again. That plane is being kept by the White House and given to Melania. So it's like, even when there's corruption and somebody needs to be ousted for this corruption, the money is not going anywhere. It's still staying in the administration.
Yeah, it's not going back to the American people or something. Right.
Stick with Trump.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because, when my mom first said it, I was like, interesting. And then I was like thinking about it and reading articles. And I'm so glad that Slate put out this specific piece of about this topic, because I was like, yeah, this is, again, just like being a fucking female comedian. And I've talked about that a lot on here, but obviously I only have so many points of reference for the life I have lived. It's not just Trump's cabinet and cabinet level female officials who are getting the boot. Defense Department head Hegseth has reportedly blocked promotions for more than a dozen high-ranking Black and female military officers, a move that many see as blatant race and gender discrimination. And according to what the three administration officials told the New York Times, an argument broke out in Hegseth's office over the appointment of Major General Antoinette R. Gant to lead the Military District of Washington, a role that includes ceremonial duties like standing with the president at Arlington National Cemetery, because Trump, the Times paraphrased, would not want to stand next to a Black female officer at military events. Under Hegseth's leadership,
the same thing about Hegseth himself. Does not want to be seen next to a Black military officer, especially females.
The fuck? Under Hegseth's leadership, and because of his decision to fire and demote dozens of the military's highest ranking women and people of color, nearly all of the military's top brass are now white men. Yeah, I mean, because obviously, it's racism, but it's also like you have to get out or remove anyone that you fear might question you when you want to be racist and sexist, You only need people who will go against their own kind. And, there's plenty of white women who will go against women.
Ooh, since we're on the
A
subject,
lot less black women, though. Yes.
Since we're already on the subject and we got past Iran, I had a tinfoil hat one to throw at you.
What's okay? Sorry, I hear like a little ringing in the background. Go ahead.
So Trump threatens the ground invasion of Iran, which leads to, like, I think it was something like 30 of his top generals argued against it. 15 of them resigned. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to a couple of friends about this. What if he was never planning on doing the ground invasion, but is threatening it to get senior military officials out and his people loyal to Trump installed, so that when he suspends elections in November, there's no military to coup him. Like, the military is much like ICE, is now his own personal battalion.
Listen, I wouldn't put it past him. We know that absolutely all roads lead to this, to Trump being surrounded by loyalists, which we even spoke about here. His second administration saw many loyalists, because I guess he learned from his mistakes in his first term, but what he deems his mistakes are different from what we as the American people deem his mistakes. And then secondly, there's absolutely no way he's just like, I'm gonna leave office and I'm gonna let these elections happen as they should.
To be fair, half of the people around him now are quote unquote never Trumpers. Marco Rubio was a never Trumper.
He's a convincing guy. He's a convincing guy.
Sure. Okay. Or there's something very, very different about Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0.
Well, yeah, also that, of course. Back to the article. Bondi, Nome, and the other women in Trump world knew exactly what they were getting themselves into. It is not a secret that this president has asked his attorneys general and other high-ranking officials to break the law and defy the Constitution. It is not a secret that he is quick to anger, and who he fires and retains is often scattershot. Bondi and Nome may be victims of Trumpian sexism, but they're also villains of their own making. They haven't exactly earned our sympathy. And while I agree that they haven't earned our sympathy and that they knew that the Trump administration was going to do, I will say that the extra hurdle that they had to get over was this hurdle of maybe they didn't realize just how sexist he is. And maybe there is a part of you, that even when you're hired to do evil work, that thinks wow, I am hired to this job, again, to do evil work as a woman. I'm breaking down barriers. There must be something special about me. I've worked so hard and I've earned this. And so I do, in that respect, have a little bit more sympathy from them, because, both men and women can set out to be evil. That is everyone's right. But in executing the evil and making the evil, in manifesting the evil into reality, both the men and women should be held to the same standards. And even when they're purveyors of evil, they are not. Their ouster, though, tells us something important about this president, his administration, and his movement, that conservatism is a trap for women. No matter how hard MAGA women try to please their masters, the ideology is set up to blame women for the problems faced by American men, to demand female subservience, and to scapegoat women when something goes wrong. That's last part especially. MAGA rewards women who claim that they are not like other girls, who tote guns like the boys, but always with barrel-curled hair and glossy lips, who might ascend to powerful roles but are quick to emphasize their most important roles are those of wife and mother. These women are useful cudgels against the feminists who complain about things like gender discrimination or sexism. They have bucked up Buttercup, and look at them now. Look at them now, treated ultimately like every other girl. I loved that article. I thought it was really good, and I was excited to share that one with you guys. Oh boy. And going into the firing of Pam Bondi, also in other Pam Bondi news, it also just came out that she is not going to testify on the Epstein files. So this is from BBC from 8 hours ago. Former Attorney General Pam Bondi will not testify on Epstein files next week, Justice Department says. Oh my goodness, everything. I feel like there's no news left that you don't have to bypass a paywall for. It is actually crazy. And perhaps.
So the Justice Department is claiming this as like, as far as like, that's their assertion.
Well, we're gonna find out, Michael.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's what the article's about. Can you pull it up also for me? Like some of these articles are not working on my on my browser bypasser paywall thingy, and I don't know why. Thank you. All right, Pam Bondi will not testify about the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein to a congressional committee next week because she is no longer the U.S. Attorney General, the Justice Department says. Or is it because they want to silence women? The Justice Department told the House Oversight Committee that Bondi will not appear at the 14th of April deposition as she was subpoenaed in her capacity as Attorney General, a committee spokesperson confirmed to the BBC. Bondi was removed from her role as America's top law enforcement officer by President Donald Trump last week. Some members on the committee say that they will. One second, I got to plug my laptop in. Got to move the whole thing. Sorry, I had to get my laptop close enough, and now I really can't move. We can go back to the article. Bondi was removed. Some members on the committee say that they will push for Bondi to answer questions at a later date. Nancy Mace, a Republican member of the committee, said that the subpoena requires Bondi to appear, and her no longer being Attorney General does not erase her obligation to testify and does not end congressional oversight. Mace urged Republican chairman of the House. Hello. James Comer to publicly reaffirm former Attorney General Pam Bondi's legal obligation to appear for her deposition. Because it's like, yeah, she already knows what she knows. You know, the American people deserve to know whether Congress was misled and whether information about Jeffrey Epstein and his associates is being withheld, Mace wrote. And I think Mace, like us, is kind of sniffing. It's like, you know, what Pam Bondi knows part of the reason she was fired, you know? Ranking Democrat Robert Garcia echoed those sentiments. She must come in to testify immediately, and if she defies the subpoena, we will begin contempt charges, he wrote in a statement. Bondi has not commented. Earlier this year, Bondi was formally summoned to answer questions over any possible mismanagement of the Justice Department's investigation into the late convicted sex offender, according to a subpoena letter written by Comer. Bondi and the Trump administration have faced pressure across the political spectrum to release all of the documents related to Epstein. Last November, Trump signed into law legislation passed by Congress compelling the Justice Department to release all of the material from its investigations into Epstein. After millions of documents were released, the agency faced bipartisan backlash, with some lawmakers accusing it of failing to obscure some identifying information about survivors and of allegedly protecting the identities of those who were not victims. As Attorney General, you are directly responsible for overseeing the department's collection, review, and determinations regarding the release of files pursuant to the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and the committee therefore believes that you possess valuable insight into those efforts, Comer said of Bondi last month. And I will also say, it's like another way we could look at this is like Pam Bondi was fired because of whatever, you know, because of other reasons. And the real problem here and why she can't testify is because it's like, well, now, like the article we just read, she is not being protected by the Trump administration. She is not on the Trump team. She is not one of Trump's good girls. And so obviously when the administration has turned against her, maybe what she would testify or how she would testify would change because, you know, no one testifies better than someone who has been burned by their former employer. The Congressional Committee has already compelled a number of high-profile figures to testify in the case, including former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. On Tuesday, the committee announced scheduled testimony with Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates in June. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is expected to testify in the coming weeks. Dun, dun, dun. Bad boys, bad boys. Let let's see. All right. Also going into like more fuckery. Where are we with the time? Okay, 2 hours. More into the fuckery. I wanted to talk about some more voting nonsense that has been going on. Again, Democracy Docket is just doing such a great job of covering specific stuff that's going on with voters, voter suppression, changes by the GOP, gerrymandering. I mean, all this kind of stuff. Shit. Sorry, leaving one thing up. All right. So as Save America Act stalls, GOP states are quietly enacting their own proof of citizenship laws. This is from democracydocket.com. President Donald Trump's effort to push his restrictive anti-voting bill through Congress has so far failed. Trump said he won't pass anything until the Save America Act, a voting bill that could disenfranchise millions of Americans and poses barriers for students, the disability community, married women, and Americans overseas, is set in stone. The president has insisted, despite data revealing it's not true, that the United States has a widespread voter fraud issue. It's one he's determined to fix. And again, this past week, there was a video going viral in the politics world about someone who was at a Turning Point USA event, and Erica Kirk was on stage with some other woman, I forgot who, but another woman, and they were spouting all of this misinformation about voter fraud. And God bless them, someone in the audience stood up and read her to filth and provided her with statistics on voter fraud, which, as anyone who's looked it up at all knows, is in fact quite rare in the US. I'm not saying it's rare everywhere. There are some places where it's certainly happening. It's one he's determined to fix. The problem, voting experts say Trump and his Republican envoys are seeking a flawed solution to a non-issue. While the bill introduced March 17th remains stalled in the Senate, some state leaders have posted about, proposed, and even enacted statewide proof of citizenship laws to vote. This isn't new. Some states have had proof of citizenship voting laws for years, but now a flood of other states are following suit. Anti-voting groups across the nation are also pressuring states to pass new restrictive voting laws. Catherine Engelbrecht, the founder of True the Vote, described the right-wing conspiracy theory group's focus during a live stream on Wednesday. If the Save America Act isn't going to pass, then I'm going to use every tool at my disposal to try and get states to react to something, Engelbrecht said. Co-host Meg Denning read multiple excerpts from the Bible during the live stream, followed by a promise to take the issue of proof of citizenship for voting, quote, to the courts. Meanwhile, Democratic leaders worry about states' momentum in enacting these laws. Republicans in state legislatures are wasting no time in passing copycat Save America Act legislation, making sure voter suppression moves forward even with Congress in gridlock. Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee President Heather Williams wrote in a statement on April 3rd. 10 states have laws, 4 of which passed in the second Trump administration, that require proof of citizenship when registering to vote. Florida, Mississippi, South Dakota, and Utah all enacted proof of citizenship voting bills in the past 2 weeks. And so if you're someone in one of those states and you are able to donate your time when, at the polls, especially, to witness with, your feet on the ground and your eyes on reality, you donate your time to working at polling stations. I think that is incredibly noble and important work to be doing. And we need people who will spout the truth and who will watch things with an unbiased eye, making sure that voter suppression isn't happening, especially in districts that are predominantly Black or predominantly not white or predominantly immigrant. In 12 other states, bills are moving through state legislatures with lawsuits following. Although Vermont is a deep blue state, voting rights advocates say it's not immune. Even if the president doesn't get his way and get the Save America Act through, or doesn't issue it as an executive order, which will have to be challenged in court at the state level. Many of the changes from the SAVE Act are already happening in parts of the country, said Marguerite Adelman, the president of the League of Women Voters of Vermont. Here's a state-by-state breakdown with data from the Voting Rights Lab's election policy tracker. So Florida, Republican Governor Ron DeSantis signed Florida's law enacting proof of citizenship requirements when registering to vote on April 1st. The Florida provisions would go into effect in 2027. Florida residents would need the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles to verify citizenship, only able to cast provisional ballots without this verification. Student ID, retirement center ID, and neighborhood association ID are examples provided in HB 991 as identification forms that don't make the cut. But voting rights groups in Florida have already started to sue. Mississippi's SHIELD Act, which would take effect July 1st, passed in the state Senate and was signed by Governor Tate Reeves, obviously Republican, April 1st. According to the law, all registered voters will be automatically enrolled in a state-run system managing elections. The law also creates a partnership between the state and the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services Systemic Alien Verification for Entitlement System, which is the SAVE system. Senate Elections Committee Chairman Senator Jeremy England, Republican, said the legislation does not address whether information about non-citizens would be turned over to the authorities, according to local reporting from the Senate floor February 5th. England said that the state has found around 15 non-citizens. That's out of 1.7 million people who are registered to vote in Mississippi. South Dakota, Republican Governor Larry Roden signed South Dakota's Proof of Citizenship Bill March 26th. This law takes effect immediately, meaning new voters looking to cast their ballot in the June 2nd primary and in the general midterm election must provide documentation proving their citizenship. While a reported 273 non-citizens registered to vote across the state, according to the Secretary of State's office, just one voted in the 2016 general election. And then Utah. Meanwhile, in Utah, only one non-citizen was found to be registered and not a single non-citizen has voted in a Utah election, according to Lieutenant Governor Deirdre Henderson's Republican review. Despite this, Utah's HB 0209, requiring proof of citizenship to vote, was signed into law March 25th. Seems like a lot of changes are being made to voting rights and requirements. The bill provides an exception for federal-only ballots, which would then cancel out if the National Save America Act, which faces long odds as it stalls in the Senate, passes. That doesn't mean that the seeds aren't there. Bills in limbo. While still working through legislative chambers, other states are on the verge of passing their own Save America Act adjacent bills. 5 states have proof of citizenship bills passed in one or both chambers, and 8 states have bills introduced. Even in states without bills introduced, Republican state and federal representatives have pushed for state versions of the Save America Act in their legislatures. U.S. Senator Dave McCormick, Republican Pennsylvania, touted Trump's vision to nationalize the voting in his own call for nationwide voter identification in advance of the 2026 midterm elections. But like Adelman of the League of Women Voters noted, blue states like New York, Michigan, and Rhode Island have also seen proposed legislation for proof of citizenship requirements over the past year. It got introduced, but it didn't make crossover in Montpelier, and it didn't really even get a hearing, Adelman said. But that doesn't mean that the seeds aren't there, even here in Bernie Sanders's and Ben and Jerry's Vermont. I added those two. All right. So let's see. So I'm just deciding what I want to talk about next. So I want to talk about Venezuela and Cuba a little bit. I'm going to move to this War on the Rocks article. This is from April 3rd by Charles Larot Smith, and this is from warontherocks.com. You know, this is a news source I'm using. Oh, I actually didn't do my little check on it. It was recommended to me. War on the Rocks. bias. War on the Rocks is widely regarded as a platform for realistic, policy-oriented analysis focusing on defense, foreign affairs, and national security, often featuring contributions from practitioners. It is generally seen as centrist to slightly right of center in the U.S. foreign policy spectrum, favoring traditional power-based and realist approaches to international relations. So just keep that in mind as I read this article. Again, this is the limits of Trump's regime capture strategy from Venezuela to Cuba. Let me see. Okay. Since the beginning of the year, President Donald Trump has enthusiastically reinstated regime change as a key tool of U.S. statecraft, despite previously campaigning against the military excesses of former presidents. And that's one of the things that Mike liked about him. The drastic foreign policy reversal owes much to his administration's dramatic capture of former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in a successful raid and arrest on January 3rd. Clearly encouraged by the apparent ease with which this act of leadership decapitation converted a one-time regional adversary into something Trump can present as a vassal state virtually overnight. The administration has sought to replicate this success in other revisionist states, most notably by initiating fresh conflict with Iran on February 28th. However, their current war with Iran and the regional instability that has ensued in the Middle East has raised considerable doubts as to the replicability of Trump's newfound strategy. It has also obscured not only the motives, aims, and objectives that drove the intrepid military operation that captured Maduro, but any subsequent debate on whether these were achievable, and if so, how they served U.S. interests. Upon closer analysis, it becomes clear that few, if any, of the stated objectives touted by administration officials are viable in Venezuela, either in the short or long term. The strategy of regime co-optation in Venezuela might lead to some immediate positive outcomes, such as the recent release of political prisoners, but it is unlikely to lead to economic stabilization or an eventual democratization of the country. Tellingly, this strategy does further one long-standing policy goal of the Republican Party, fostering regime collapse in Cuba. History does not repeat itself. It's just poorly plagiarized. On December 19th, 1908, Venezuelan Vice President Juan Vicente Gomez quietly deposed his boss, President Cipriano Castro, while Castro was receiving medical treatment overseas. With the support of the Roosevelt and Taft administrations, Gomez quickly pledged to honor his country's foreign debts and opened up the country's vast oil reserves for foreign investment, reversing his predecessor's policies that had made Venezuela an international pariah. The burgeoning relationship proved successful. During his 27-year-long dictatorship, Gomez modernized Venezuela using oil revenues provided largely by the United States. The northern hegemon in oil in exchange secured a key oil supplier and stable ally in a strategically important yet volatile region for the remainder of the century. Some 117 years later, the United States again finds itself the key protagonist in another Venezuelan political transition following the capture of Maduro and its country's sudden geopolitical realignment. However, despite the similar circumstances to the ouster of another Venezuelan president early last century, this time it is unlikely that either country will similarly benefit from the renewed relationship. All early signs indicate that Trump's unorthodox strategy of regime co-optation is unlikely to achieve its economic, electoral, or geopolitical objectives in the short or long term. What exactly then is his administration's endgame in Venezuela? On the surface, it is hard not to assume it is all about oil. Immediately following Maduro's capture, arrest, and swift replacement with his malleable vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, who, in other news has overstayed her term, Trump claimed stewardship of Venezuela's vast oil reserves, framing the move as part of a three-phase plan to stabilize the country, revive Venezuela's moribund oil production, and oversee a democratic transition. Numerous challenges threaten the feasibility of this strategy. Venezuela's oil infrastructure is decrepit, while American energy companies have balked at investing in an autocratic country fond of expropriating foreign assets. The current American regulation of Venezuelan oil sales similarly does not address the country's structural economic problems, further complicating any stabilization or democratic transition. Others believe that it is yet another media distraction. However, the administration's attempt to frame Maduro's capture as a historic foreign policy victory has not succeeded in distracting the American public from other persistent scandals and has produced mixed reactions at home. Recent polls have shown a near parity between those who approve and disapprove of the military operation to remove Maduro from power, although a clear majority lack confidence in Trump's ability to manage the country moving forward, numbers that are heavily skewed along the partisan divide. Public attitudes towards the Trump administration's foreign adventure in the South American country are unlikely to improve anytime soon. Despite the superficial changes inside Venezuela, the Sans Maduro regime maintains total control, and the average Venezuelan's living conditions remain abysmal, while Trump has sidelined Venezuela's democratic opposition. China continues to make inroads in the region despite the Trump administration's recent exercise of the Trump corollary in the Western Hemisphere. The initial impact of Trump's strategy does point to one long-standing policy goal that appears within reach after decades of failure, regime collapse in Cuba. Since Maduro's capture and Venezuela's realignment with Washington, shipments of subsidized fuel to Cuba have evaporated, exacerbating widespread scarcity to the breaking point. The concerted policy coordination behind the renewed maximalist approach towards Cuba suggests that instead of merely being complementary to larger goals in Venezuela, it might be the opposite. Regime co-optation in Venezuela is a means to dismantle Cuba's regime. Regime change in Cuba. Similar to other foreign policy endeavors, Maduro's recent capture bears the hallmarks of the Trump administration's policy formation process. In the absence of a grand strategy, different factions lobby Trump to enact their preferred course of action by promising easy victories that showcase American strength abroad and yield some economic benefit for the president. Different administration officials perceive regime co-optation in Venezuela as an easy means to score public relations wins, seize control of oil reserves, validate American interventionism, expansionism in its near abroad, and hasten regime collapse in Cuba. This aggressive revival of gunboat diplomacy in Latin America has outwardly achieved some of these immediate goals, but questions remain as to why the administration has seemingly prioritized regime collapse in Cuba at the expense of a veritable democratic transition in Venezuela. All signs point to the influence of Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio. The son of Cuban immigrants and a stalwart of Florida's Cuban exile community, Rubio spearheaded the maximalist pressure against Venezuela and Cuba during Trump's first administration and appears to have learned that the only way to weaken either regime was to sever the robust bilateral ties that ensured their collective survival. Regime co-optation in Venezuela not only ruptures this vital relationship, but it also spares the administration from potentially undertaking two arduous state-building projects in the region when it is simultaneously trying to militarily induce regime change in Iran. Other factors have shaped this asymmetric approach to Venezuela and Cuba. Powerful Cuban-American interest groups have staunchly supported the Republican Party for decades in pursuit of toppling the communist dictatorship. The Cuban regime, currently led by President Miguel Diaz-Canel, has little to offer Trump except for vague promises of stability and modest reforms. Florida's Cuban community is not likely to tolerate an ambiguously defined transition that permits a continuation of the current regime when its collapse appears imminent. In contrast, the Sans Maduro regime has granted Trump access to Venezuela's oil reserves, while the Venezuelan electorate possesses no comparable electoral influence in the United States to dissuade the administration from allying with Maduro's inner circle. The road to Havana goes through Caracas and seemingly Tehran. When Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez assumed president In 1999, Venezuela and Cuba quickly developed a symbiotic codependency. Chavez provided highly subsidized fuel and cheap loans to the Castro brothers, while they in turn supplied their South American ally with doctors, security personnel, and perhaps most importantly, intelligence experts. However, regime co-optation in Venezuela has ended these critical oil shipments to Cuba. The recent seizure of Venezuelan oil tankers and the threat of additional American tariffs against countries sending fuel to Cuba threatened to destroy the Caribbean country's meager economic capacity and accelerate its collapse. The Sans Maduro regime has demonstrated a willingness to break ranks with Cuba and become an American vassal state as long as the recalibration ensures its own survival. However, the Trump administration may derive the wrong lessons from this geopolitical shift. It was the unprecedented and likely illegal exfiltration of Venezuela's sitting president that finally achieved regime co-optation, not the sustained maximum pressure campaign in place since 2019. As recent history shows, both the Venezuelan and Cuban regimes have an abnormal threshold for external pressure and internal isolation. They have both survived prolonged humanitarian crises, more often than not self-inflicted, that were compounded by comprehensive sanctions regimes led by the United States. They did so by strategically hedging their alliances and streamlining the distribution of dwindling state resources to an even smaller number of key actors required to maintain regime survival. Meanwhile, the civilian population bore the brunt of the repression and extreme austerity demanded by this autocratic survival strategy. In the past, both regimes responded to severe economic contractions and the ensuing reduction in food imports by maintaining or adopting centralized food rationing systems, leaving average citizens to procure the majority of their dietary necessities on their own. Unsurprisingly, food insecurity and hunger became widespread. During the special period following the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 until Chavez became the island's new patron after 1999, the average Cuban lost an average of 5 to 25% of his or her body weight. Similarly, the average Venezuelan lost 24 pounds during the implosion of the country's economy in 2016. Presently, both regimes are playing for time, but under different circumstances. Trump's use of economic coercion via tariffs has been severely curtailed by the U.S. Supreme Court's recent ruling, and he is certain to be constrained by further checks and balances following November's midterms elections, if they happen. Until then, however, it is unclear what constraints exist, if any, that could discourage Trump from seeking to replicate what he perceives as successful regime decapitation in Venezuela in other adversarial states such as Cuba. Although Trump's ability to coerce other countries through tariff threats has been limited, he can still hypothetically enforce a complete blockade against Cuba via temporary tariffs, as permitted under Section 122 of the 1974 Trade Act, or other economic measures outlined in the various congressional acts codified over previous decades. As Cuba deteriorates further, the regime has sought lifelines and relief elsewhere with minimal success. Some regional and international partners not aligned with the Trump administration have provided humanitarian aid, giving the Cuban regime a modest respite from the unprecedented economic pressure. In late February, the U.S. Treasury Department authorized the resale of Venezuelan oil to Cuba as long as it was used strictly for commercial and humanitarian use, apparently in response to domestic and regional backlash against the potential fallout from regime collapse. Domestically, the regime is purportedly trying to increase existing energy production from crude to solar, yet in light of the recent collapse of the country's electrical grid, these measures appear to be too little, too late. In the event that the regime somehow resists the current pressure and the Trump administration tires of waiting for its collapse, opting for direct military action against Cuba, it will find leadership decapitation an easier feat than trying to foster regime co-optation with some pliant faction within the existing leadership core. Unlike Venezuela and similar to Iran, the Cuban regime was forged in a violent revolution whereby all alternative power centers were destroyed and the Communist Party of Cuba assumed total control of the island, permeating every facet of life imaginable. Quite simply, finding opportunistic replacements who can and will throw the likes of Diaz-Canel and former leader Raul Castro under the bus is a considerably more challenging task than it was in Venezuela. If attacked militarily or facing imminent collapse due to the intolerable conditions, the Cuban leadership may very well resort to their own trump card that it has played previously on various occasions by weaponizing immigration. Devoid of the military capacity, let alone the basic resources required to defend itself against the United States, the Cuban regime could plausibly open the pressure valve by encouraging outgoing immigration in order to mobilize American public opinion against the Trump administration and the adverse effects of the maximum pressure campaign. Quite simply, Republican voters do not want more asylum seekers trying to gain entry to the United States, while Democratic voters do not want to see human rights abuses happening on their doorstep. The Sans Maduro regime, in contrast, will likely appease Trump to the extent that it can, without upsetting the more hardline elements of the ruling coalition, including figures such as Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello, while using what oil revenues it does receive to strengthen its position in anticipation of his eventual exit from office. However, the ruling coalition is far from monolithic. Rather, it represents a union between civil ideologues cosplaying as revolutionaries and kleptocratic military officials. Both factions have thus far circled the wagon to maintain regime cohesion and accept Washington's impositions. However, it is possible that the civilian faction, many of whom previously received training in Cuba, will chafe at the sudden break with Havana and will look to resume ties once the opportunity presents itself, if the Cuban regime is still intact. The military faction, on the other hand, has less affinity for Cuba, but nevertheless is bound to harbor enormous resentment against the United States for the international humiliation it has been forced to endure. But what is occurring in Venezuela and Cuba is not playing out in a bubble. The conflict between the United States and Iran affects the outcome of the administration's strategy in the Caribbean basin in several important ways. Importantly, American military actions against Iran have prompted the Islamic Republic to close the Strait of Hormuz, leading global oil prices to rise over $100 per barrel, making investments in the Venezuelan oil industry look more attractive by the day. However, the estimated costs, human expertise, and time required to revive Venezuelan oil production to previous record levels, coupled with the uncertainty surrounding the Sans Maduro regime, has hitherto dissuaded foreign investment in Venezuela. Paradoxically, Trump's three-stage plan posits that financial stability is required to facilitate a democratic transition, yet no energy company wants to invest in an enterprise overseen by such an odious regime. The dramatic military escalation has already forced the Trump administration to shift its focus and concentrate military assets in the Middle East, a move that might ease pressure on both the Venezuelan and Cuban regimes and buy them time to strategically adapt to their new realities, despite the constant barrage of threats coming from Trump himself. Conversely, the longer the Iranian conflict drags on without producing any tangible foreign policy success, the more likely Trump will be to either escalate commitment or cut and run. In either case, he may look for a more attainable public relations victory elsewhere to divert attention. This renewed American intervention in the Americas and the Middle East is also playing out amidst a backdrop of intensifying geopolitical competition between the United States and China. As highlighted in the 2025 National Security Strategy, a central goal of the Trump administration in the Americas is to contain and expel Chinese influence from the region, an objective that Maduro's ouster seemingly advances. Yet regime co-optation in Venezuela might prove beneficial to China in the long term, as it allows the Asian superpower to divest from Venezuela and write off the South American country's debts that are unlikely to be repaid. China has strategically sought to protect its investments and defend its commercial interests linked to the region without risking full-blown escalation with the Trump administration. However, the fate of Venezuela and Cuba are ancillary to longer-term Chinese strategy, which would sacrifice influence in the Americas if it secured hegemony in Asia. What's next? As time wears on and the Trump administration discovers how challenging, expensive, and exhausting military-led regime change campaigns are, particularly in the Persian Gulf, it will be at risk of experiencing a premature case of imperial overreach. If Trump does opt to escalate the war in Iran at the present, which all signs suggest he will, obviously, things change every day, then this will considerably limit his options for future action in Cuba. In this event, it is highly probable that the administration will search for an available off-ramp regardless of the sunk costs in its Venezuela and Cuba policies. Despite American officials asserting that time is not on Cuba's side, the same can be said for the administration. If the current regimes in either Venezuela or Cuba, or any incarnation of these regimes, still find themselves in power following the expected losses for the Republican Party in the midterm elections, then they will surely have weathered the worst and will be better positioned to survive in the long term. What happens in those two countries is important because it has ramifications for the larger region. Early 20th century gunboat diplomacy secured U.S. hegemony in the Americas and produced substantial economic benefits for domestic interests, yet left the region with entrenched institutional deficiencies and lasting grievances. Trump's bellicose embrace of American interventionism has produced performative compliance from regional leaders. However, this obedience is unlikely to be sustained solely by the threat of military force now that economic coercion is no longer readily available as a tool of American statecraft as it was until recently. As the specter of hegemonic imposition recedes with the waning of Trump's power, many distrustful Latin American countries will continue to hedge their sovereignty by deepening ties with other middle and great powers. And this article, as I said, is by Charles Larat Smith from April 3rd. And he is a PhD, an assistant professor in the Department of Criminal Justice and Security Studies at the University of Texas at El Paso. He has published numerous academic articles, book chapters, and media pieces about authoritarian survival, criminal dynamics, and migration in Venezuela. And I wanted to share that because, number one, it's an article that ties together a lot of things that we've been talking about on this show. Obviously, a lot of problems, and wars that we've gotten ourselves into with other countries. It talks about, the United States pre-midterm, post-midterm. And just because foreign policy is definitely not my area of expertise, as we know on the show, and my area of expertise would be municipal policy. And then, the show is an understanding of what is happening in America. I always like to get, this is like not an, I guess this is kind of like this is like a step up from an op-ed, I would say, but still has like that op-ed-y feel with a lot of historical information and also someone who is, kind of able to look at the past and see how these new conflicts and crises can relate to each other. So that's why I wanted to share that article specifically about Venezuela and Cuba.
Just to put like a bit of an American spin on it, I guess. Like the biggest thing that Cuba's come across my timeline recently has been for Hassan Piker and Kneecap. Have you seen any of that?
You mean how the establishment Democrats are waging a war against Hassan Piker?
Okay, so that's I
don't know what
Kneecap.
Sorry, I don't know what Kneecap is. I have to look about that.
Kneecap is the Irish punk band that was like super pro-Palestinian. They took the English court they took the English government to court, I think, over their lyrics.
Oh no! So I actually don't. I don't know. So what is Kneecap's problem with Hassan Piker?
No. So there was like a whole flotilla of like influencers who were down in Cuba being like,
right.
Hey, we're in the country or whatever. And Kneecap played a concert that people were saying that the amps were turned up a little bit too high and it was drawing too much power. And that same night, a hospital like lost power and everybody who was like on ventilators passed away. And they brought that up like in stark contrast of like Hassan Piker in a hotel room in Cuba streaming, taking up, vital power that, while people were dying on other parts of the island in like, hey, we're here, we're doing this cool socialist thing, but we're staying in Cuba's version of a 5-star hotel. where, you know what I mean? Like our
Well, I mean, that's always how it goes. You know, when
course.
anyone in the public eye is doing philanthropy work, which is, kind of why when my handle is philanthropy gal, it's a little bit tongue in cheek. It's a little bit of a commentary about patting ourselves on the back for doing minimal, for being of minimal service. And I know people love Hassan Piker, but Hassan Piker is rich. Hassan Piker is a nepo baby or a nepo nephew. Hassan Piker is and Hassan Piker is a celebrity. And so while I think a lot of things that he does are great, as far as, the primary one being impacting how Gen Z and millennials, take in political information and really getting people riled up and wanting to participate in politics. I think all those things are really great that he does. But, I do still think he still acts like, a snarky rich celebrity. So, but, I didn't even want to talk about that, because I said I didn't like Hassan Piker ages before the establishment Democrats. And now that the establishment Democrats are against Hassan Piker, I don't even want to pile on Hassan Piker, because I certainly am not trying to have the same POV as establishment Democrats. And like I said, even though I think a lot of things that he said are fucked up in the past, I do think it's great that he is getting young people really interested in politics and, showing other ways that we can have political discussions, one of which is live streaming. And I think that's really cool and really important.
Sure.
But that's a conversation that's going on the left right now. But I think so the story that you just shared with me, that didn't even come across my radar.
Really?
No, I love that. And I love that, because I certainly have a lot of Hassan Piker content on my algorithm. Even though I did have to unfollow him personally, I still get plenty of Hassan Piker information. But yeah, no, I didn't catch that story. Or it could have possibly came by me and maybe I didn't know what kneecap was, but I don't remember seeing it at all. I feel like I would have remembered kneecap.
This was maybe a couple of weeks ago, but
I know I knew every now and then I know about flotillas going. I knew about that. I know that Quentin Quarantino, that account, he tried to do he tried to get into Israel to do some kind of activism or philanthropic work. And he found out that he was banned from entering Israel. I know about that.
But I don't know. It just seems like a country that has that little resources. Now is not the time to go there and make a grand gesture about being there. I don't know. At least in my opinion,
Right.
I've been to Cuba and seen food shortages on a Monday when things were good. Now is not the time to be going there and hey, I'm going to need your best hotel and make sure that AC is cranking.
Right. Wait, you said you went to Cuba?
Yeah.
When?
2017,
For
right
what purpose?
when I think you had to get a visa at JFK at the time, and I think it was cultural expansion or something like that. It was a vacation, but yeah, it was I treated it as a learning thing. It was one of the coolest vacations I've ever taken.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I've actually heard from other people that Cuba was also their favorite vacation, from people who are pretty well traveled. So, yeah, listen, I agree with a lot of the critiques about Hassan Piker, as far as he's living lavishly in Cuba as other people are suffering. I think it's a bit of a stretch to say that the live streaming is taking up that much electricity. I don't think it really does, but it's a bad look.
So that did, when you said establishment Dems, that was where my head went, because I was like, you know what? In hindsight, that does seem like the kind of story the New York Times would run with, to be see how bad this guy is when he's actually doing something kind of okay.
Right. A large concert. Okay. I feel like that's more on the table of okay, yeah, we can have a conversation about how much resources that's taking up. One guy live streaming, I don't really think is taking up very much electricity. And it's in a time when we certainly can't trust our administration's reports on it, and we don't know exactly what's coming out of Cuba. Hassan Piker is basically a journalist at this point. So to have someone kind of go on their own and do their own investigative journalism, I don't think that's crazy or bad. I think that can be good. but just like anyone doing any type of philanthropy work, like, yeah, it's like, listen, Hassan Piker can talk about socialism all day. He absolutely doesn't want to be living like the rest of us. We know that. I mean, we know that. You don't wake up looking the way Hassan Piker looks if you're roughing it. You just don't. That guy has a 12-step skincare routine, and we know he does. And good on him. If I was that good looking, I would too. I have a pretty extensive skincare routine, but not if I was in Cuba, I don't think. All right, let's wrap it up real quick with, just an ICE update. NPR published an article this week acknowledging that it uses powerful spyware. We know this. We know spyware is everywhere. I don't think we have to, even go read this whole article just because we're already a little over time, but that's an ICE update. I wanted to do an ICE update, every single fucking week, in addition to the Palantir thing that we talked about. And then as far as Marjorie Taylor Greene goes, we can close it up on that story. And this is, again, as a reminder, Republican Clay Fuller wins Georgia runoff to replace Marjorie Taylor Greene in House, helping GOP's narrow majority. And this is from CBS News. And it was updated, today at 6:00 Eastern. Republican Clay Fuller won Tuesday's runoff election to replace former Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia's 14th congressional district. CBS News projects padding the House GOP's padding the House GOP's razor-thin margin by an additional vote. Fuller beat Democrat Sean Harris in the Northwest Georgia district after the two advanced from a crowded field of candidates in a special election on March 10th. Fuller won by fewer than 12 points, a 25-point swing from when President Trump won the district by 37 points in 2024. And that's a good thing. Democrats are improving kind of everywhere, making it the biggest swing in a House special election during Mr. Trump's second term. Greene won the district 29 points in 2024 and 31.8 points in 2022. Fullerton. Wednesday. Sorry, this is just the wrong name. I was like, is this another person? Sorry. Fuller Wednesday called his win a dominating performance, saying Democrats should be concerned about the campaign money spent on Harris, who said he wasn't even competitive in this special election. And of course, as someone who was endorsed by Trump, Clayton Fuller also speaks like Trump. We're really proud of how we did, he told CBS News chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett on the takeout. Greene said Tuesday's margin shows voter backlash against Mr. Trump. In a post on X, she wrote that the district was never in danger of flipping, but the results speak for themselves. And again, this is tying into things like, literal crazy people like Nick Fuentes have said, when he was telling people don't vote for Republicans until they learn their lesson. This is what's going to happen. Trump flipping MAGA from America First to America Last, covering up for the Epstein files and betraying key campaign promises of no more foreign wars has been the best help for Democrats. Sad, she wrote. I really do. There's something about her I really like. When asked about Mr. Trump and his conflict with Greene, Fuller told CBS News his constituents aren't concerned about the past and that he's looking forward to supporting the president and his America First agenda in Washington. And again, yet another female role being taken now by a man. The voters are concerned about sending me up to Capitol Hill to make sure that I'm a fighter for President Trump and bringing back those manufacturing jobs to the district, Fuller said. They want a fighter up there for the future to have their backs and have President Trump's back. A candidate had to receive a majority of the vote in March to avoid a runoff. Harris, a retired Army general, pulled in more votes than Fuller, a district attorney, in last month's contest as Republicans split their votes among several candidates. Though it injected a jolt of optimism into the possibility that Democrats could pull off a major upset, Harris faced long odds in a one-on-one matchup in the reliably conservative district. The outcome gives House Republicans, who had a 217 to 214 majority leading up to Fuller's victory, another seat, as any one of defection has threatened to derail Another seat as any one defection has threatened to derail their legislative agenda in recent months. Another seat is held by an independent who switched his party affiliation in March, but still caucuses with Republicans. Fuller's win bumps Eric Adams. Fuller's win bumps up Republicans' margin to 2 votes. Fuller, who had Mr. Trump's backing, will serve out the remainder of Greene's 2-year term, which ends in January 2027. Greene resigned in January after a falling out with Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump celebrated Fuller's win in a Truth Social post Wednesday, calling him a very large improvement over his, quote, deranged predecessor. And if you don't remember who Clayton Fuller is, we did go to his website, Clay Fuller for Georgia, and it's, you know, it's wild. There's a pop-up immediately that says endorsed by President Trump. President Trump given, 2 thumbs up, saying he will not let you down. Picture with his family. It says faith, duty, America first. So, I mean, buckle up. This guy looks much worse than Marjorie Taylor Greene. And as usual, we as Americans get what we vote for. Just going to close it off with this little tiny thing that I found. There was a much, much longer article that we don't have time for. It'll take me like half an hour to read. Maybe I'll get to it another week. I don't know. There were some longer articles this week, but the New York Times, much to the dismay of many people because they hate when extremism is platformed, but the New York Times this week did do this long piece on the women who believe that women should lose the right to vote. And so that got me tinkering a little bit around online for how popular it actually was for people to want the 19th Amendment repealed. And I came across this Reddit thread. It's on the Reddit Ask Conservatives, and Tolkien fan 2759 writes, I read a book lately which blamed which already off to a grammatically incorrect start. I read a book lately which blamed the 19th Amendment, 1920, for the explosion of sexual freedom that American women enjoyed in the 1920s. And I see that there are good things and bad things about the culture of permissiveness we now enjoy. I haven't read about it in any depth, but my feeling is that those who supported the amendment wanted basically 2 things. First, they thought women would have a calming and an enlightening effect on politics. Second, they thought it was only right that women as people, crazy that he had to clarify that, should have an equal say in government. So basically, they thought it would be good for the women and good for the culture, and maybe you agree that it has been. But as for me, I see that conservatives have a vision for what they want for this people to be. Liberals don't seem to have any such vision, and having such a vision is important for a people, I think. We want the vision to be inclusive, but we also want the vision to be one which demands something of its citizens. That's a nice way of saying we want the vision to be exactly our vision, and then if other women will spout out our vision, then that'll be fine. And so my question to you is, and again, this was written 3 years ago, but still pretty modern times, I would argue. And so my question to you is, what do you think the positive and the negatives would be of repealing the 19th Amendment? I'm not suggesting we could put the permissiveness genie back in the bottle, but I am suggesting we could restore the best part of what used to be shared goals. And just for context and to give you something to think about before responding, if you would, I'd like to add a link to this article from 2010 about how they did things then in Iran. Oh my God. And then he links to an article. Well, this is in German, it seems. But it says if you use Google Chrome, this will be, I didn't read this additional article yet. If you use Google Chrome, it will automatically be translated into English. All right, let's see. And hilarious because my Coven meeting just pulled up in Google Chrome. Let's see. I guess this is the yes. No, definitely did not translate it to English. Is your Google Chrome translating it to English? Oh my God. In bizarre. I can see it says uber sex, a lot of sex. Wait, where is the Trying to get this into English. I never read things from other languages, so I forgot that we could do this. All right. Oh, I guess let me just run the article because this made me laugh so hard. Let me just run the article title through. Do you know how to translate it in real time? I'm just gonna run this.
Is that not translated?
Are you joking with me right now? Oh,
In the bizarre of this.
Oh, sorry. For a second, it looked like it was the same start to the sentence. Okay, wait. So in the bizarre of the sexes, mullahs like to talk about sex. What is that?
You want me to read it? And Corinne is gone. All right, technical difficulties, folks. Give me 1 second.
Oh, so a mullah is a Muslim educator.
Here, try it now, Corinne.
Shiite Muslims is based on the teachings of Muhammad. It has allowed pilgrims and soldiers to legally satisfy their sexual needs in a country where fornication is considered a capital crime. Temporary marriage is reportedly becoming increasingly popular in Iran, though precise figures are unavailable. The documentary In the Bazaar of Genders takes a closer look at the institution. In marriage bureaus, contracts are drawn up regulating the exchange of sex for money. A mullah cheerfully lectures on the topic. Okay, so it's about things are done in Iran, and for this article to start out like this, for number one, the guy on American Reddit to bring up like, should we take away women's right to vote, and then he goes, here's an interesting article about things are done in Iran and we could do temporary marriage. Is like, what is even happening right now? I know I just appeared, Mike. It froze and no one was answering me. Anyway, all right. Well, what was the last thing that you heard me say before I went off? We made it so close to the end before there was a problem.
You were talking about the insanity of this person saying repeal the act and then temporary marriages ?
Right, and then he just goes, and then I was like, oh, okay, I didn't read this article that he had attached at the end when I found this Reddit thread, and then for the article to start with temporary marriages and controlling women's sexuality in some kind of way, I've heard enough. It's just really amazing to me, the kinds of conversations that are being had earnestly online. But that was I was considering that a palate cleanser for the end of the episode, but perhaps you guys don't look at palate cleansers the same way I do. At any rate, thank you so much for joining us this evening. What a fun, action-packed episode that we just had. Again, as a reminder, if you're in New York City, tomorrow, the Nacho Bitches one night only reunion with me, Blair Saki, Rosebud Baker, Lisa Traeger, and Ian Fidance happens at 9:15 p.m. at New York Comedy Club. In the Midtown location, East 24th Street. Get the tickets now, please. And make sure to follow me on social media. I'm at Philanthropy Gal. DM those reels of mine to people that you think would enjoy them, because that's what the algorithm is really counting as the most important part of reels on Instagram. That's how it, shows it to other people. So share those reels with other people. If you like a joke, if you like something I said, that's a super helpful free way to help me out. And if you want to become a Patreon subscriber, it's patreon.com/withoutaCountry. Obviously, to subscribe to the Without a Country YouTube channel as well. It's free. It supports the show. It's amazing. And Mike, what do you have to promote?
So coming up Saturday, April 18th at the Truck Bar in Berlin, Connecticut. The Armor League going to be in the state for the first time. And if you're listening to this, you live near Hartford and want to pick me up from the Bradley Airport, I'll personally give you 2 free tickets to the Armor League at the Truck Bar. DM me on Instagram at the M Harrington. Looking forward to seeing a bunch of smiling faces at the Truck Bar, Berlin, Connecticut, April 18th.
Whoa, so wild. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember, the truth is in there. Keep looking for Shelly Miscavige, and keep an eye on what's happening in your state when it comes to voter suppression, changes in how you vote, changes in what you need to provide to show up to vote. This is very important going into the midterms. I love you guys so much. Thanks for being here. Have a great night. Peace.
Running from the man, yeah, the madman's coming, yeah, the man's gunning for me tonight. I spent the last week running from the heat, but the beat beats coming alive.